After a few thousand people made the same request that I cover every episode of Better Call Saul, I came up with a groundbreaking idea. I'm going to cover every episode of Better Call Saul.
It's showtime, folks.
Saul Goodman was introduced in Season 2 of Breaking Bad as the kind of sleazy lawyer that only lowlives and criminals would use. All the stereotypes were there. The comb-over, the snazzy suits, the general aura of tacky showmanship of his environment, and audiences loved him.
Hi, I'm Saul Goodman. Did you know that you have rights? The Constitution says you do.
This love and interest to explore his character more was shared by show creators Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould, and before Breaking Bad had even finished airing, the planning for Saul Goodman's spin-off series was already underway. Fast forward to today and we have a complete story to work through. So let's explore each episode of Better Call Saul, so we can enjoy the highs, the lows, and everything in between. Remember the Granite State episode of Breaking Bad when Saul Goodman said this?
From here on out, I'm Mr. Low Profile, just another douchebag with a job and 3 pairs of Dockers. If I'm lucky, a month from now, best case scenario, I'm managing a Cinnabon in Omaha.
Well, that best case scenario is exactly where he's landed, as we see in this flash forward opening to the first episode. But he doesn't seem all that happy about his situation. He's constantly paranoid, thinking someone's looking his way. And later at home, he's watching his old Better Call Saul commercials on a VHS tape, clearly missing his Saul Goodman days.
I'm Saul Goodman, and I'm here to tell you that they're wrong. It's never too late for justice.
And luckily for us, we get to see those glory days right now. So we get to see Saul Goodman in court, which isn't something we got to see in Breaking Bad. And this first case gives us a great insight into Saul's persuasive skills as a defense attorney, and also the type of clients he represents. In this case, he's defending some dumb teenagers who did a very dumb thing.
If I were held accountable for some of the stupid decisions I made when I was 19, oh boy, wow. I don't think they deserve to have their bright futures ruined by a momentary, minute, never to be repeated lapse of judgment.
Well, I'm all of a sudden feeling more forgiving, but what did these teenagers do exactly? Oh, they had sex with a severed head of a corpse. Welcome to the show, everybody. Saul collects his crappy pay, hops into his crappy car, and tries to exit to meet the next client. But he gets stopped at the parking barrier by Mike Ehrmantraut for not having his parking validation.
Thank you for restoring my faith in the judicial system. Now you either pay the $3 or you go back inside and you get an additional sticker.
We'll come back to this happy chappy later. For reasons which I'll explain later in the video, Saul Goodman isn't called Saul Goodman yet. He goes by his birth name, James or Jimmy McGill. So we'll call him Jimmy for a while. The next client Jimmy meets is very important to this part of the story. It's a soppy cuck vibe fella and his ballbuster wife, the Kettlemans. So basically, this guy called Craig, God damn it, stole $1.6 million from the county treasury, and his wife insists that they aren't guilty of anything, and therefore don't need a lawyer right now, which means that Jimmy has lost out on his potential client for now. Did you know that Better Call Saul is a horror movie? Cause this next part shit me up.
Well, no, it's paid out. Run it again.
Now I've removed my testicles from my lungs, we can move on. So these bozos are trying to pull a scam on our boy, not knowing that he grew up being called Slippin' Jimmy, and he smells out scams like he's a Nigerian prince on Hotmail.
Does a steaming pile of crap scream payday to you, huh? The only way that entire car is worth $500 is if there's a $300 hooker sitting in it.
So they scamper away, but they'll be back in the story before you know it. Jimmy pays a visit to HHM, a law firm he used to work at as a mailman, and it's clear that most of the people still working there view him undesirably.
Oh, Sir Francis.
James.
Well-groomed as always.
Okay.
All right.
He's here because the firm are sending his brother Chuck, who was a founding member of HHM, small amounts of money by check, but Jimmy believes they owe Chuck more.
No more penny ante checks designed to make it look like Chuck still works here. He doesn't. he never will again. It's time to do right by him and cash him out.
This is just one of the ways in which Jimmy goes to great lengths to protect his brother. The most notable way is that Chuck has a weird mentally induced reaction to electricity, so he can't be exposed to the outside world, and his entire house is cut off from electricity, practically living in the Stone Age. So Jimmy brings in his groceries and does his best to protect Chuck from anything electrical entering the house. Back at HHM, Jimmy is prepared to leave morally victorious, but then he overhears Betsy Kettleman signing up for legal representation after she rejected his proposal that morning. A massive kick to his ego, followed by this iconic kicking the crap out of a bin scene. And this is followed by the proper introduction of the second most important character in Jimmy's story, Kim Wexler. A woman who somehow looks both 21 and 41 at the same time. And Jimmy's slipping it in her, if you can believe it. And I know what you're thinking, she's way too good for him. But just give it time and you'll see the full depth of their relationship. Triggered by Betsy's betrayal, Jimmy hires the scamming Skater Scruffs to do the same car accident scam on her, with the payoff being that Jimmy arrives on scene to settle the matter, which should convince Betty that Jimmy is the lawyer that she needs in her life. Problem is, Skater Scruff 1 gets hit by the wrong car, and they follow who they believe to be Betsy all the way to her house when she makes a run for it. It turns out to be an elderly Latina who barely speaks any English, so she leads them inside to talk to her grandson. Jimmy is hot on the trail and manages to find where they went, and then when he knocks on the door, he gets greeted by a gun and a familiar friendly face from Breaking Bad. I love the opening to this episode. What Better Call Saul lacks in excitement compared to Breaking Bad, it more than makes up for it with excellent filmmaking. The carnal sounds and rapid cutting of this tomato, revealing to be Tuco making a delicious meal for his grandma, makes for the perfect juxtaposition to give us the vibe that he's a family man, but also a deadly man. Well, I guess we already knew the latter part from Breaking Bad, but still, an amazing way to open the episode. So we see the scamming story from Tuco's point of view, and these two insufferable idiots are quick to offend the worst man you could ever offend.
Just a crazy old biznatch who ran over my brother. It hurts so bad. It hurts so bad.
Biznatch. What a great word. But yeah, he ain't gonna let that slide, and he knocks them down real hard.
No.
Biznatch.
Then he goes to greet Jimmy, who's banging at the door, and points a gun at his head for answers. Luckily, Jimmy's golden tongue convinces Tuco not to shoot him yet, saying that he's going to take his clients and simply disappear, without a single word reported to the police.
Wow. You got a mouth on you. Thank you.
Skater Scruff 2 quickly rats on Jimmy, despite him essentially saving his life. And this triggers Tuco into taking them all out to the desert for a good old-fashioned interrogation. Jimmy pleads that this is a case of mistaken identity, and confesses that they were running a scam against a different woman. But Tuco has trouble believing him.
I smell lies.
Luckily, his smarter nephew Nacho steps in to advise that killing a lawyer isn't a smart business move. But as for the other two, yeah, they're fair game. Now this is the first moment that really took me by surprise. Once again we get to see Jimmy's brilliant negotiation skills. Instead of walking away and allowing them to be killed, he reasons with Tuco to reach a deal that in order for them to spread the word that Tuco isn't to be messed with, they need to remain alive. But to offer payment for the insult to his grandma, he can break one leg of each man.
They can't skateboard for 6 months, and they're scared of you forever. And you show everybody that you are the man, but that you're fair.
Watching Jimmy's face hearing their legs being broken is the first scene of his character entering a new chapter. Like it or not, he's now a known man to the cartel, and this won't be the last messed up thing he's involved with. Later that night, we get more excellent carnal sound design as Jimmy gets PTSD watching these breadsticks being snapped, just like leg bones. Jimmy gets drunk to overcome the fresh memories of what happened and crashes at Chuck's place. And the next morning is where we see the troubled past of their relationship, where Chuck wants Jimmy to move away from the Slippin' Jimmy days, yet he finds the hospital bill that Jimmy paid for the Skater Scruffs.
I know how this looks. I'm down to my last dime and suddenly I'm paying for broken legs, but I'm not backsliding. This isn't slipping Jimmy.
Fine.
It's also hinted that Chuck's condition is connected to Jimmy's history of wrongdoing, in that Chuck's negative opinion of Jimmy drives his mental condition into this strange coping mechanism. Honestly, it's super interesting, and I'm glad that this is part of their story.
Take off the space blanket. I didn't do anything wrong.
It has nothing to do with that. It was your phone.
Take off the space blanket.
After an entertaining montage of watching Jimmy's typical work week, including an ongoing battle over parking validation stickers with Mike,
Like a troll under a bridge. You must have the stickers or you won't pass.
we see Jimmy go back to his rundown office in the back of this nail salon to finally call it a night. But then Nacho comes knocking with a business proposition that he steals the money from the Kettlemans and cuts Jimmy a slice of the money, and all Jimmy needs to do is figure out where they stashed the money away. An offer which Jimmy turns down, not wanting to be involved in this level of crime.
For when you figure out you're in the game.
The episode opens up with a flashback to a time when Chuck was getting slipping Jimmy out of jail time. We see the disappointment in Chuck's face and the desperation on Jimmy's face to be given another chance.
Do not make a fool out of me.
I promise I won't.
Jimmy, feeling sour about the Kettleman still and contemplating Nacho's offer, rings up Kim to see if he can dig up any dirt to find clues as to where they might be hiding the cash. But he accidentally airs out the idea that they could be in danger from criminals seeking out the money. He plays it off to Kim as a drunken ramble, but then he spooks himself with the belief that it might actually happen. So he calls in anonymously to warn the Kettlemans that someone is coming for their money.
Your whole family's in danger. The money.
You have a terrible connection.
Kettlemans, you're in danger. They're coming for your money. Bye.
And this phone call triggers off a series of unexpected events. The first is that the Kettlemans disappear from their house, and then Jimmy finds out that Nacho has been arrested and has requested that Jimmy be his legal representation. But the biggest surprise comes when he reveals that he never entered the Kettleman's house, and that the only person he told his plan to was Jimmy, which makes Jimmy the only person that could have ratted him out. And so Nacho gives Jimmy 24 hours to get him out of custody, or he's going to be a marked man.
You miserable piece of shit. You get me out of here today, or you're a dead man.
You'll have noticed that I'm skipping over certain details, but if you know me and my principles on content creation, you know that when I make these recap videos, I focus mainly on the points that drive the plot forward, which allows you to go watch the original for yourself, so you can discover the other cool stuff. So please keep that in mind before leaving angry comments. So, for some reason which I question the legality of, the police officers allow Jimmy to go to the crime scene to see if he can come up with a credible explanation for the disappearance. And when looking at the daughter's room, he notices that her dolly is missing, suggesting that it was a planned exit and not a kidnap like the police suggest. On his way back to Nacho, Mike won't allow him through the barriers for skipping out on paying the last time.
Screw you, geezer.
So Jimmy gets all up in Mike's face, which ends very badly. And when Mike is about to press charges, he overhears Jimmy's theory on the Kettlemans and decides instead to offer him some advice.
It's human nature to want to stay close to home. And if this Kettleman figured out how to do it, that's what he did. Nobody wants to leave home.
And sure enough, after a fairly lengthy trek through the forest behind the Kettleman's house, he stumbles across their tent.
Let's do this.
Here's Johnny. Hey, Warren. Hey, Jojo. Sorry about that. I'm your Uncle Jimmy, all right?
I love you, Bob Odenkirk. Ballbuster Betsy resists the idea of going back home, and during an altercation, all of the money which they definitely didn't steal bursts open. That's pretty much game over, right? Well, let's continue watching. Opening with another flashback to Slippin' Jimmy days, Jimmy is pulling the scheme on this guy, and he's working with his friend who's pretending to be this drunkard laying on the floor here. It was obviously a scam right from the moment where this guy finds a random wallet, so the reveal came as no surprise to me and my humongous brain. It was great to see some of Slippin' Jimmy's rebellious cool guy days. You can tell he's cool because he has long hair and does drugs. Maybe we get to see more of this backstory in the animated Slippin' Jimmy show, but that looks like trash and I refuse to watch it.
So, you bring a sled for me? Nope.
Back with the Kettlemans, they offer Jimmy a bribe to keep his mouth closed about the money, an idea of which he initially feels that it goes against his morals, but turning down that kind of cash would take the piety of a saint, so he files a good chunk of it as expenses, and then uses the rest of the money to do something only a devious mind like Jimmy would think to do. So with his bitterness against Howard Hamlin, he pays for a suit, a haircut, and a billboard to look like an exact carbon copy of Howard and the aesthetic of HHM, with the end goal of getting under Howard's skin.
What the hell is he thinking with this?
Really, he's, a free spirit.
Which seems extremely petty, and perhaps it is. But the plot thickens later, trust me. Naturally, Howard sends a cease and desist, and the judge immediately sides with Howard, seeing how silly this situation is.
I don't see any other reasonable explanation.
Your Honor.
Jimmy, wise up. The billboard must come down within 48 hours.
Still, was funny to see Jimmy cosplaying as Howard.
Yikes.
Yikes. From the man dressed exactly like me. Your Honor, I feel like I'm in the mirror routine with Groucho Marx.
Determined not to be shut down without winning, Jimmy stages a local hero moment by saving a guy who quote-unquote fell while taking his billboard down, knowing full well that this rescue would draw a crowd and the attention of local news.
This whole thing was a publicity stunt. It's gotta be.
You can't keep getting away with it!
Later that night, when Jimmy arrives back at his office, he finally has some clients on his answering machine, and you can't help but feel satisfied with this moment, after watching him be so disheartened with the lack of messages up until now.
You have 0 messages.
One thing he forgot to account for with this PR stunt is the fact that Chuck is an avid reader of newspapers, because that's his only news source without electricity. So Jimmy hides Chuck's copy of the Albuquerque Journal, which is a real newspaper. I don't know if that's interesting or painfully uninteresting. But anyway, Chuck simply can't do without this newspaper, and pushes his physical and mental limits by venturing outside to steal the neighbour's copy. I really like this effective sound design and frantic editing to portray Chuck's perspective on this hostile world, and then it comedically cuts to how it looks to outsiders. Needless to say, Chuck discovers what Jimmy was hiding, and the episode ends with Chuck wrapping himself tighter into the space blanket. Chuck's neighbour snitched on him for stealing the paper, so 2 cops roll up demanding that he opens the door, and when he refuses, they bust open and tase him. We'll check his pulse later. Until then, we have Jimmy following up some leads generated from his billboard PR stunt. The first one being this wealthy sovereign state wannabe, and he's quite possibly the wackiest one-off character in this show.
We are going to be America's Vatican City.
Yeehaw! 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 Yes, we are doing this!
Jimmy gets excited when this man offers him $1 million, but that balloon bursts when he sees that this man meant $1 million of his very own made-up currency. The second client has an even sillier proposition. He wants to patent his invention, which is a toilet that gives compliments when children take a fat shit.
Gosh, you're big. You're so big.
Amazing. Third time's a charm, it seems, with this next client, as she's using Jimmy's services for a straightforward wheel, with the slight gimmick of her wheel including these Hummel figurines.
I found the Alpine Shepherd Boy.
This next scene of Jimmy painting Kim's toes is significant for 2 reasons. The first reason, and I wish I was kidding, is that while doing some research, I was made aware of a seedy subsection of the internet that has turned Kim's feet into a sexual thing. But out of the darkness comes light, as we do have some hilarious memes. This GIF being my absolute favourite. Me when I accidentally delete my Kim Wexler feet folder. The more significant event in this scene is that Kim gets a call to say that Chuck is in hospital. So if you can prise yourself away from her feet for a second, we should go check in on Chuck. Jimmy explains to the nurse that he needs all of the electronics out of the room, and she immediately suspects that Chuck needs psychiatric evaluation. When the nurse suggests this to be the case, Jimmy and Chuck argue that Chuck is a clever boy and can therefore tell the difference between a mental condition and a physical condition. But they wasn't aware that this nurse had a tuna sandwich for lunch, so her brain is freshly juiced with omega-3, and she turns on the power to his bed in this Chad move to prove to Jimmy that his condition is in fact all in his head.
That was a dirty trick.
That wasn't a trick, it was a demonstration.
Back home, they discuss the connection between Chuck reading the newspaper and his hospital visit, and Jimmy explains that the PR stunt was simply to get the ball rolling on his business, and that he's going to do things by the book from here on, deciding that he's going to specialise in elder law based on the one successful client he had earlier. Chuck doesn't quite believe him, but he does miraculously seem better now. Next we see Jimmy slip in some promo pots of jelly to elderly folk, just so that he can drum up more business. And I just chuckle at the idea that one day when I'm old and dying, having only one thing to look forward to in my day, and that's my jelly, only to have my pot of jelly remind me that I'm gonna die soon, so I should probably write a will. Towards the end of the episode, we see Jimmy and Mike talking, and they have this amazing banter with each other.
What you reading there? The complete annotated book of rules for parking validation?
No. The rules for parking validation are actually pretty simple. Most people get it on the first try.
We then follow Mike around for a while. He swings by this lady's house, and we'll discover who this is in the next episode. And then later at home, he gets a knock at the door from the police.
You're a long way from home, aren't you?
You and me both.
Calling it now, this episode is peak Mike Ehrmantraut. If Jonathan Banks was to win an award for any episode, it has to be this one, because his acting is god tier. We get a flashback to see Mike arriving by train in Albuquerque to make this state his new home. But why has he run away? We'll find out later. He's picked up by this lady who turns out to be his son's wife, and she has the world's most annoying daughter. Trust me, just wait. After he and his daughter-in-law get into a disagreement over the circumstances of his son's death, he goes to a vet to get his mysterious gunshot wound treated. Let's rewind to see how he got this boo-boo. So Mike is at a cop bar to cope with the loss of losing his son, Matty. He drunkenly staggers over to an officer and a sergeant who Matty worked alongside with, and Mike knows for certain that they killed Matty for not accepting dirty money.
I know it was you.
He confronts them with the truth before wandering off, leaving them panicking about what Mike might do to get revenge. They see him walking the streets after the bar closes and offer him a lift, with the end goal of killing him to keep what they did a secret. But it turns out Mike was faking being drunk, and he takes them both out.
He's drinking himself to death. We're doing him a favor.
Smart. That's what I would have done if I were you.
Honestly, this sequence is so perfect, there's no way I could do it justice without simply just showing you it. The next thing we see is Mike basically confessing what he's done to his daughter-in-law, Stacy. To sum up what's said here, Mike reveals that he always held his son to a higher standard than he did himself, and he was very proud of Matt's straight-laced approach to enforcing the law. So proud he was that even the suggestion that he might have played dirty sends him into a rage.
He wasn't dirty! God damn you! You get that through your head! My son wasn't dirty!
In Matt's last moments, Mike told him over the phone to take the dirty money for the sake of saving his own life. But by that point, it was too late, and the other cops killed him out of fear for him ratting them out. Mike is heartbroken at the idea that he tried to corrupt his son, and in the end it wasn't even worth it. Which means their final conversation as father and son is when Mike tried to ruin his son's integrity.
Broke my boy. I broke my boy.
This is why Jonathan Banks deserves an award. You'd have to be made of stone not to choke up right now. Naturally, the cops assume that Mike is behind the murder of Matt's colleagues, and during the interview process, Mike demands that he sees his lawyer, one particular lawyer who owes him a favour for helping him out of trouble. Chuck is feeling useless to the world being out of work, so he's training himself to endure longer periods of pain, being a part of the world outside of his dark and depressing den. My face when no hentai or Discord trolling. Jimmy sees an opportunity to capitalise on Chuck's boredom by leaving behind some case files, fully expecting that Chuck won't be able to keep his grubby mitts off. But what's the end goal? We'll see soon enough. Jimmy is still doing well with his elderly clients, hosting bingo nights to get further into their good books. I'm amused at the idea that one day when I'm old and dying, I have only one evening a week to look forward to, and that's playing bingo with my few surviving buddies. Only to have my bingo card remind me that I'm gonna die soon, so I should write a will. I sure hope they serve jelly after we play bingo.
Bingo! Oh, we have a winner! Lady Luck has struck again.
Jimmy gets a call from the Kettlemans after Ballbuster Betsy refused to listen to the good advice Kim gave them. The advice being to give the money back, which will reward him with less jail time.
It includes the stipulation that you return $1.6 million in misappropriated funds.
Give back the money.
But there is no money.
There's no money.
We told you Craig is innocent.
It's so funny watching Craig become a softer lump of spineless clay as he allows Betsy to dictate what choices he makes. And there's so many subtle things to remind you of his weakness, like him wanting coffee but allowing Betsy to unknowingly decide for him.
We've parted ways.
I've seen cum socks with a tougher spine than this man. Jimmy wants to refuse them as clients, knowing that Kim will be punished for losing them. But they remind him that in the worst case scenario where they have to give all the money back, they will need him to return the bribe they gave him. Now this is where Jimmy's cunning mind comes to play, in one of my favourite schemes in the entire series. He knows that he's kind of locked into this situation. He has no choice but to accept them as clients for their mutual benefit. But this gives him time to come up with a plan that frees him from their control, and also gets Kim her clients back. And this is where Mike steps back into the scene to help. So Mike sends the Kettlemans a bundle of cash sprayed with a UV liquid, so that when Betsy puts it with the rest of the cash, Mike is able to break in later with a UV light and trace exactly where she's been hiding it all. The next day, Jimmy comes knocking and tells them their cash is on its way to the DA's office.
Might I suggest that you go check on that money you insist you didn't take? In the upstairs bathroom, under the sink?
This forces them to take the deal which Kim worked so hard to set up for them. So right now you'd be thinking that Jimmy feels pretty good about himself. But the problem is, with all of that cash back where it should be, and out of the Kettleman's cupboards and Jimmy's pockets, he can no longer afford this swanky new office he's been eyeing up. Meaning for the time being he has to remain in the crappy nail salon. Flashback time. In this one we see Jimmy working in the HHM mailroom, and Kim reveals the good news to him that he passed the bar exam, so now he gets to be a lawyer. With his tail wagging happily, he goes to Chuck to seek his approval, and possibly to get a job as a lawyer for HHM.
Are you proud of me?
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks.
While Chuck acts happy for him, you can tell that something is bothering him about this. And the next episode, we'll find out what his problem is. We get another impressive moment of filmmaking with this next scene. So while Jimmy celebrates his qualification, Howard walks in and asks for a moment of his time. And instead of letting us hear what's being said, we are only given their body language. And from this alone, we can tell that Howard is denying him the position of lawyer under HHM. Something of which is confirmed when the door opens.
Let's reassess in 6 months. Thanks for understanding, Jimmy.
This clever scene configuration allows us to feel how trapped Jimmy is by boxing him within the frame into the mailroom, and the constant noise of the photocopier gives us the sensation of repetition and mundane environment. And we see Howard asserting his dominance from the start, insisting that Jimmy sits down while he remains standing, and he almost seems proud of giving Jimmy the bad news. I'm not going to spend too long talking about the amazing filmmaking of this show, as videos covering this subject already exist. I'll just be pointing out the moments that impressed me the most in this regard. In this episode, Jimmy discovers that the retirement home of his clients are controlling all of the residents' money, and then taking out more than they should be to pay for supplies. Jimmy takes his suspicions to Chuck for advice. We hear in this scene that the reason Jimmy deliberately left all his files here was so that Chuck would be tempted to process some of the wills for him out of boredom.
Don't thank me. This was a one-time thing. And don't think I don't see what you were doing here. You need help? Hire a paralegal. Stand on your own 2 feet.
Yeah, sure. I'll do that.
Chuck also helps him research the different trade laws potentially violated by the Sandpiper retirement home in their attempts to maximise company profits, or something along those lines. When Jimmy comes by to see his clients again, he's stopped at the door by a clearly panicking secretary and her security team, preventing Jimmy from poking his nose into their business, while another sus member of staff seems to be shredding documents. Jimmy tricks the secretary into letting him use the bathroom so he can write a demand letter on a piece of cardboard and toilet paper. A crude method perhaps, but it is a legally binding document.
This is a demand letter informing Sandpiper Crossing of pending litigation for defrauding my clients through systematic overcharging. This makes it official, right? If you don't stop shredding right now, that's destruction of evidence. Spoliation, that's what it's called.
Jimmy then waits for nightfall to go sneaking around the shadows like Batman looking for clues. Clues in the form of whatever they managed to get away with shredding earlier. It's super funny when he dives into the gross bin, only to later realise that the documents he's looking for are in the recycling bin. With the tireless efforts of Jimmy and Chuck piecing together the evidence, they fax it to Sandpiper's lawyer to show how screwed they are. Jimmy and Chuck have decided they're a team on this case.
What? Did we just become best friends? Yup!
And Chuck knows they have a strong enough poker hand to demand a settlement of $20 million. The Sandpiper lawyers of course retreat from this proposal, knowing they've got to find a way to get out of this hole. With Chuck's confidence at its highest point since the illness started, he walks outside to get some files from Jimmy's car, and it's only when he's made aware of the fact that he's outside that he stumbles in shock, leaving Chuck more confused about the cause and validity of his condition. Richard Schweikart of Schweikart & Coakley, the firm representing Sandpiper, is throwing all sorts of small counter cases at Jimmy, knowing that if their firm keeps adding to the pile of paperwork, it might deter Jimmy from continuing the case. Jimmy is determined to keep going no matter how big of a task, but Chuck insists that they refer the case to HHM.
And what we're facing here, a case this size, it is not a two-man job. We need help.
No.
Jimmy finally caves and agrees to the referral, but Chuck senses there could be a problem, so he sneakily calls Howard to have a private conversation. And when we find out what was said in this conversation, it's pretty brutal. Looking to earn some extra cash, Mike takes on a protection job with two other supposed tough guys, one of which being Stephen Ogg, who is most notable for being the voice actor of Trevor from GTA 5.
Take off your pants, cowboy, alright? Let's fuck.
Stephen Ogg tries to intimidate Mike, seeing him as a weak link for coming to a protection job with no weapon, only carrying this pimento sandwich for lunch. Mike shows him who's boss by disarming him and slapping him in the throat, and the Man Mountain runs away in fear.
I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
So the protection job is for this nerdy guy who we'll call Lester because he reminds me of Lester from GTA 5. Lester is selling pills to Nacho, and from here on it's quite apparent that Nacho is going to be an integral character to this series, and he is without a doubt my favourite character, for reasons that I'll explain as we go forward. Back to Jimmy, he's expecting to be offered a position working with HHM as a reward for referring this massive case, but Howard refuses, leaving Jimmy perplexed and angry.
Go to hell, Howard. I'm not giving you my case.
Jimmy notices his phone battery is dead, which is very unusual as he always turns it off overnight. He then appears at Chuck's house after he discovered by calling his phone company that Chuck used his phone to call Howard and ask him to not give Jimmy a job at HHM. But why, you ask? Well, it turns out Chuck is majorly bitter about how Jimmy became a lawyer.
You're not a real lawyer. The University of American Samoa, for Christ's sake? An online course? What a joke. I worked my ass off to get where I am.
I can kind of understand Chuck feeling the firm would be cheapened by Jimmy being their lawyer, but that's still a massively shitty thing for a brother to do. Given their history of Chuck getting him out of legal trouble in the Slipping Jimmy days, and Jimmy doing everything he can for Chuck while he's mentally ill, you can understand the anger from both sides, even if emotionally we feel more empathy towards Jimmy. Jimmy, feeling deflated and hurt, accepts Howard's deal to be cashed out, feeling he will never be taken seriously as a lawyer. He hands Howard a list of things that Chuck needs delivered on a daily basis, and it's nice to see Howard genuinely impressed by Jimmy's commitment to look after his brother, showing that Howard does have a heart.
I always liked you, Jimmy. Remember? I used to call you Charlie Hustle.
Yeah, I remember that.
Jimmy tries to carry on with his day as normal, hosting bingo for the old folks, hoping to drum up more business, but he struggles to keep his mental state in check and eventually bursts open.
What is it with this place? It's like living inside an easy bake oven. You know what? Any of this stuff you want? Come get it.
Jimmy decides it's time to pay his hometown a visit. If slipping Jimmy is the only thing Chuck will ever see him as, why not go back to his roots and enjoy himself? And enjoy himself he does. He meets up with his friend Marco, the wallet scam guy from earlier. They share some drinks, pull off another scam, sleep with some women.
You are not Kevin Costner.
I was last night.
And then they pull off one last lost wallet scam, with the excitement of one more scam being too much for Marco as he just dies. Back home, Jimmy gets offered a job at a law firm called Davis & Main, who are working with HHM on the Sandpiper case. So finally, Jimmy has a chance at the good life. But as he's about to go meet his new bosses, he touches the ring that Marco left him, and he feels like he's betraying the person who he really is deep down. So he drives away, proclaiming that he won't be tied down anymore. And that's the end of season 1. This opening flash forward is purely here to show you that even though Jimmy has a new identity, he must remain as low profile as possible, meaning that he cannot be in the presence of emergency services, even when he himself is in need of these services, which happens to be the case right now as he's trapped in this room. Speaking of low profile, Lester is doing the opposite by splashing his criminal cash on shit like this monstrosity. Mike says no way are they doing business in that thing, so Lester fires him.
Well, I'm sorry, but this is the gravy train, and it's leaving the station.
Without Mike's protection, Nacho smells blood in the water and circles around Lester's car, pretending to be impressed by it when all he really wants is to find out where he lives.
That's good.
Jimmy slips into a beach bum lifestyle, feeling liberated from the chains of legal work and trying to impress Chuck. Kim comes along to see what's up, and they end up working a scam together on some douche type character in the bar. And then there's a really intense moment where Kim and Jimmy stumble out of the bar drunk as skunks, and she looks at him like he's a juicy steak that she wants served rare. Drunk Kim has no business being this attractive. Lester gets robbed by some mystery man who stole his cash as well as his baseball cards. So like an idiot, he calls the cops to report the baseball cards being stolen. When the police arrive, it doesn't take them long to sniff out something fishy going on here. What with the flashy car outside and the carpet suggesting that something was hidden behind the sofa. So naturally they pretend not to notice this while they investigate this serious case.
Okay, I know, right?
Jimmy realises that he can't live this lifestyle forever. Cocktails cost money. So he decides to take the job at Davis & Main and give the corporate lifestyle a shot. But within 5 minutes he's already breaking the rules and dicking around by turning off a switch that tells him not to. Chuck is in a state of distraction, thinking about the Jimmy situation, which is causing him to mess up his Piano Hero session. Howard then comes along to deliver the wonderful news that Jimmy is now a real lawyer. And then Chuck is like, so what? Not even bothered. I'm actually happy for him. I don't even think about him anymore. Whatever. Jimmy is starting to enjoy some real lawyer benefits like a nice new Mercedes, which is the perfect car, with the slight nagging detail that the cup holder isn't big enough for the thermal mug that Kim gifted him.
Must be metric.
I only mention that part because this cup acts as a plot device in a later episode. Mike spots Lester visiting the police, and when he finds out that this guy is actually reporting a crime, being a criminal himself, he tells the idiot that he's being an idiot, and that he will sort out the missing baseball card problem himself if Lester agrees to go home right now and not speak to the police. Much to Nacho's surprise, Mike rocks up at his dad's business pretending to be a customer, and after some pretend shopping, he gets down to business. And he tells Nacho that if he doesn't give Lester's cards back, he's going to tell Tuco about his little side hustle. Now obviously Mike doesn't expect Nacho to give them back to Lester for free. He's going to get Lester's disgusting looking Hummer, which he would then sell for scrap value.
I'll make sure the boys at the chop shop are real gentle with her.
Wait, why? You think I'd be caught dead driving that thing? It looks like a school bus for 6-year-old pimps.
Jimmy is trying his best to move on from being under Chuck's shadow, but Chuck decides to join a meeting between HHM and Davis and Maine, reminding Jimmy that for as long as he's working for a high-end firm in Albuquerque, Chuck will be swimming in the same pond. So when Mike rings up for a favour, Jimmy has no hesitation in continuing to do shady work on the side. For this particular job, he's trying to get the police to close the case on Lester, as he now has his baseball cards back. With the police not being satisfied with the story that he simply found them using a PI, Jimmy convinces them that Lester is involved in fetish videos, and an unsatisfied customer stole the cards after a dispute. Now the trick here is to make it a fetish so strange that the police would never think that Jimmy would make it up.
Squat cobbler.
What's a squat cobbler?
He sits in a pie and he wiggles around.
The episode comically ends with Jimmy and Kim eating pies, as Kim airs her confusion as to why Jimmy would be doing shady work on the side now that he's got a good job.
I was doing a favor for a friend.
Risking disbarment? That's some friend.
It's fine. It worked out.
Jimmy is dressed up like a cattle ranch tycoon to hop aboard this bus he paid to have suddenly break down. He does this so he can solicit more clients without needing to pass the security at the Sandpiper residence, a dirty trick which wins him a tidy amount of new sign-ups. Naturally, his detractors, Howard and Chuck, question his methods to see if they can sniff out anything unethical, but he scrapes by for now, with the support of his new boss who still believes there's good in him. Hungry to keep those client numbers rolling in, he brings in the film crew from the billboard stunt, and they film a commercial using one of Jimmy's old clients.
They told me they'd take care of everything, but then one day they said all my money was gone. How could that be?
And as you would imagine, this emotional manipulation got those wrinkly old fingers dialing just as fast as their arthritis would allow. Only problem is, however, Jimmy didn't run the ad by his boss, and he is pissed. Just another example of Jimmy applying a saying that my grandfather taught me. I'd much rather beg for forgiveness than ask for permission. I don't know where he got that quote from, but man, it stuck with me. And doesn't it just sum up Jimmy perfectly? At the end of the episode, Nacho summons Mike to assist him on a side quest, a quest to slay a mighty dragon who is causing him bother, and he will be rewarded with gold. I don't really know why I scripted that part like this. I'm just tired and feeling a bit loopy. Jimmy gets his one and only warning from Davis and Maine. Kim, however, doesn't get off so lightly. See, in the eyes of HHM, she witnessed the commercial before it went live, and therefore had a responsibility to report it. But Jimmy didn't tell her that this commercial wasn't approved, so this doesn't seem fair at all. And now Howard's punishing her by making her work down in doc review. Rightly so, she's pretty ticked off with Jimmy right now. Jimmy tries to strike a deal with Chuck that if HHM stop punishing Kim, he will quit the law. Chuck stands steadfast in his ethics and refuses to agree to what would basically be extortion.
Say quit and I will quit, but I need to hear it from your mouth.
You want me to commit a felony? Because that's what you do, right?
Back to Mike and his quest. Turns out the dragon he must slay... Alright, I'm gonna stop that now. Nacho wants him to kill Tuco, but Mike tells him that doing so will have the cartel on his case, and they won't quit digging until they find out. The better alternative is to have Tuco arrested, and man, the way in which Mike pulls this off is hilarious. He crashes into Tuco's car and pretends to be a dozy old man who antagonizes Tuco to the point of violence.
Let go!
I love that even though Tuco just beat the living hell out of him, Mike provokes him just a little more in front of the cops.
That all you got? Get on the ground!
Now Mike's all beat up, and Nacho still can't understand why he would go this route instead of the easier option of just simply killing Tuco and letting Nacho handle the fallout. I believe Mike explains at some point that killing a man is always his last resort. You'd have to cut his life into pieces before he gets to that point. In this episode, we get a brief moment with the original basement buddy, Crazy 8. It's cool to see him again. He's basically the founder of the Basement Buddy Discord, link in description. In this flashback, we see Chuck was actually in a relationship at some point with a woman named Rebecca. They have Jimmy over for dinner, and Chuck seems constantly on edge about Jimmy making a fool of himself or being crass, whereas Rebecca is pretty chill about it and humours Jimmy's lawyer jokes.
Wait, I think I know one.
Oh, bring it on.
Yeah. What do lawyers and sperm have in common?
Oh, just...
1 in 3 million have a chance of becoming a human being.
When Jimmy goes home, Chuck tries to make a joke too, but it falls embarrassingly flat.
What do you call 25 attorneys buried up to their chins in cement? Not enough cement.
What?
It's important to show you this because it demonstrates that Chuck's disapproval towards Jimmy veers into the realm of frustration, as Jimmy is able to charm people into seeing him in a better light than Chuck does. And in this situation, Chuck has failed to convince Rebecca to adopt his perspective.
I don't know what you're worried about. Jimmy's great.
Yeah.
Jimmy is desperately trying to get Kim out of the doghouse, but Kim is fed up of getting caught up in his shenanigans and vows to get back into Howard's good books on her own terms. To do this, she spends a long time calling up potential leads for a big client, and finally she gets a call back from a huge client called Mesa Verde.
Thank you, Paige. Me too. Okay, bye.
Kim is on top of the world, expecting this new $1 million client to be her way out of doc review. But Howard acts like it's not a big deal and keeps her where she is.
I'll put Francis on that. You've got enough on your plate in doc review.
Oh, it's okay, Kim. Would you like a foot rub? The next morning, Kim has a sit down with Chuck, where he gets a chance to express to Kim that he doesn't believe Jimmy is a bad person. He's just addicted to bad behaviour. This is one of my favourite minor conversations in the show, because even though it's not very dramatic, it brings a new level of understanding to Chuck, where he tells the story of how Jimmy used to steal from their dad's business, but Dad wouldn't believe Chuck when he tried to tell him about it. And then when their dad died, Jimmy cried the hardest at the funeral, which would have you believe that he was the more devoted son. So that little story does give some rationale towards Chuck's resentment of Jimmy. And in terms of moving the plot forward, at the end of the conversation, Chuck says he doesn't want Kim being wasted down in doc review, so he gets her back to her desk.
Good job with Mesa Verde.
To end the episode, we see Hector Salamanca pre-wheelchair, and he's come along to passively threaten Mike into taking some of the blame for the Tuco situation, so that his jail time can be reduced.
I would like for you to tell the police that the gun was yours.
Would you?
Because we didn't get to hear Hector Salamanca talk very much in Breaking Bad, hearing him talk here is very satisfying.
I'm looking for the best possible outcome for everybody.
Jimmy can't get to sleep in his swanky new apartment, so he goes back to the nail salon where he's already paid rent, so technically speaking he can still be there. This strange choice further reflects how Jimmy feels out of place, trying to live this corporate lifestyle. Mike gets pressured once more to take the deal when Hector sends in his henchman with the world's worst haircut to intimidate him, but Mike isn't willing to play ball.
Respectfully, I'm gonna have to say no.
You sure about that?
I am.
Mike knows this won't be the last time he sees Hector's goons. Swish transition, and yes, as predicted, he sees that the goons have stepped on his welcome mat, meaning that when he goes inside, he's likely to be jumped. But because this is Mike we're talking about, he stealthily checks every single room but one, and then he has a clever way to draw them out. When that didn't work, the intimidation levels get ramped up, with Hector's silent nephew twins ominously looking down from the nearby balcony. Finally taking the hint that things could turn ugly, Mike decides that it's home time for Kaylee.
Kaylee, honey, it's time to come out now.
Just a few more minutes.
No, you do what Pop says.
This is where Kaylee takes her crown as the most annoying kid ever to be put on TV, as this is the start of her "just a few more minutes" catchphrase.
Just a few more minutes.
I swear she says this like 1,000,000 times throughout the show. And just to prove how unfair I'm being to her character, I'm gonna slap a counter on the screen. Mike goes directly to Hector, and instead of taking the $5,000 to take the deal, he demands $50,000. Hector, seeing that this man is no pussy and has big huevos, respects him and agrees to the new deal. When Nacho delivers the cash that evening, Mike surprisingly gives half of it back, respectfully acknowledging the fact that their previous deal didn't go to plan, and Tuco will be back sooner than they hoped. Kim gets offered a job at Schweikart & Coakley, and while contemplating her future, she gets approached by a man trying to get laid, and she sees an opportunity to pull a scam with Jimmy.
So Giselle was telling me you two are starting a business.
What exactly did she tell you?
When they wake up in bed together the next morning, it's clear that no matter how different these two pretend to be, they still find comfort in being scheming lovers together. When they part ways to go back to work in the morning, Jimmy again gets frustrated that his corporate car doesn't accommodate his favourite mug that Kim gifted him. So he commits what some people would consider to be a sin by smashing the cup holder of his brand new Mercedes to make it fit. Jimmy, in his urgency to return back to being himself, goes to quit Davis and Maine, but realises he will have to pay his bonus back if he does. Later on, he drives past this wacky waving inflatable arm tube man and feels inspired seeing his bright and garishly colourful suits. And it's here that he realises his best move to exit the firm while retaining his bonus is to be fired for being too different to the firm's image.
Hi, Jimmy McGill.
Jimmy, this is Al Newman of Allied Funeral Homes.
Great to meet you, Al.
Nice tie.
Thanks.
When he brings in a noisy juicer and then starts playing the bagpipes, he pushes his boss into firing him.
Hey, Cliff, for what it's worth, I think you're a good guy.
For what it's worth, I think you're an asshole.
He then proposes that Kim joins him to become partners of their own law firm, but Kim has the intelligent foresight to see that would be a bad idea, considering how reckless Jimmy can be. She doesn't say this out loud, but that's my interpretation of her thoughts. After her interview with Schweikart & Coakley, she thinks about his proposal again and comes up with a new idea, that her and Jimmy share the cost of one building while practicing as separate lawyers.
I don't know what to say. Say yes.
Kim quits HHM, informing Howard of her plans to set up a new office with Jimmy. And just as Jimmy predicted he would, Howard is immediately on the phone to Mesa Verde, trying to get them to stay with HHM, knowing full well that Kim will try to take them with her, as she's the one who did the hard work in the first place to get them as clients. Meanwhile, Jimmy is scamming a military base by pretending his client is a veteran, just so that he can get a cool shot for his commercial using this old aircraft called Fifi.
This machine was used in the Pacific, where the Japanese are.
Why don't you shut up and learn to take some direction?
After a day of scheming and filming, Jimmy comes back to see that Kim is all sad because thanks to Chuck, she lost Mesa Verde to HHM. A play so taxing on his condition that Chuck goes into full baked potato mode back home. I won't take credit for that joke, Jimmy said it first.
And don't get mad at Ernie. He spent the better part of a day watching you do your impression of a baked potato.
While Chuck is in recovery, Jimmy decides to mess with the Mesa Verde files, changing the address on every document, and this action has massive consequences in episodes to come. We get a scene where Kaylee is helping to drill holes into this hose pipe, and when it's time for her to go home, of course she protests.
Well, Pop-Up's gonna have to finish this project on his own because we have to go.
Well, we're not done yet.
No, I'll finish up.
I know she didn't technically say 5 more minutes or whatever, but I'm counting this still, because I'm a horrible person. So, what's the hose for? Well, it involves a bunch of nails, and we'll find out why in less than 30 seconds. Mike uses the nail hose to burst the tyres on Hector's drug trafficking truck so that he can steal the money stashed away in the tyres. He guessed the cash would be hidden here from the audio clues he gathered while scoping out Salamanca's business, which we saw in the previous episode. Mike celebrates what he believes to be a perfect crime.
I'm buying around for the house.
Hey, listen up, everybody. This gentleman's buying around for the house.
But then Nacho pulls him up and tells him that Hector shot a good Samaritan who found a tied-up truck driver, a necessary action to prevent the guy from telling the police. So for as harmless as Mike tries to be, he can never account for the butterfly effect of stealing a huge chunk of cash from the cartel. Chuck, Howard and Mesa Verde are at an official application meeting to open their next branch for their bank, but the board notice that Chuck's filing address is wrong, and he gets worked up, adamant that he never makes mistakes. It's kind of arrogant, but we do know he's right in this case.
You are mistaken, and with all due respect, you're muddying the waters here.
Muddying the water?
It's 1261. I know where my own damn bank is.
Oh, let's just all calm down.
Instead of even considering the idea that he messed up, he compiles a conspiracy theory in his head about how this would be Jimmy's doing. But then when he calls him out in front of Kim, it doesn't go quite how he expected it to, as Kim defends Jimmy by saying that A, Chuck doesn't have proof of this act of fraud, and B, Chuck is a dick.
He's capable of this, you know he is.
I know he's not perfect. But you're the one who made him this way. He idolizes you. He accepts you. He takes care of you. And all he ever wanted was your love and support.
This speech is the biggest Kim W by far. You can tell from the way she acts afterwards that she knows he did it, but she still defends Jimmy knowing why he did it. Later that night, she subtly suggests that he should go and cover up all of the evidence of what he's done, as Chuck isn't likely to let this go. Turns out she was right, as Jimmy sees Chuck's assistant, Ernesto, asking this print shop guy if he was in here. Knowing that Chuck will come in to confirm this information for himself, Jimmy has a few minutes to go inside and change the print shop guy's mind about what he actually saw.
And he's going to ask you the same question. Did you see that guy the other night? Well, the answer is no. You feel me?
When Chuck arrives and the guy has changed his story, it sends Chuck over the edge. On the plus side, Chuck's mistake earlier made Mesa Verde go back to Kim as a client.
Hey, what did I tell you? Sometimes the good guys win.
Chuck is like an onion. Onions have layers. Chucks have layers. Peeling back this particular layer reveals that Jimmy wasn't there when their mum passed away. And before she passed, the last person she called out for was Jimmy. Chuck resents this so much that he didn't tell Jimmy what her last words were upon receiving the news.
Did she wake up? Did she say anything?
No.
The opening of the actual episode makes you feel sorry for Chuck once more, as you see him basically being tortured by hospital equipment. The upside down camera placing us in his world of disorientation.
Do a very simple CAT scan.
No CAT scan.
Calm.
No CAT
Can we
scan.
just get some restraint?
Jimmy sticks with him until he's better again, taking him back home to rest up. But instead of resting up, Chuck gets to work on a crafty scheme, which we'll come back to. Mike is following Hector and his crew to a location where they are set to kill off the truck driver from earlier. Bit harsh, innit, mate? Mike is taking aim at Hector, but Nacho is in the way, so he can't take the shot. Mike's car horn then sets off on a constant honk, and Mike is alerted to the fact that someone is watching him. And this mystery worked on me too, because other than Nacho, no one knows that Mike has it in for Hector Salamanca, and there's no way that Nacho could have done this. When we get to the reveal, it might seem obvious, but for me, the mystery here works, and that's all I care about. Chuck sets up this elaborate hoax, pretending that he's going crazy, quitting his partnership at HHM, covering his house in space blankets, and being vulnerable to Jimmy, telling him that he feels like he can't perform his job anymore because the mistake he made earlier proves that he's losing his mind.
It's this goddamn electricity. It's wearing me down. It's wearing down my faculties. My brain.
Jimmy, not wanting Chuck to suffer anything more than the loss of Mesa Verde, confesses that Chuck isn't losing his mind and that Jimmy was behind the fraudulent documents. And the whole time Jimmy was confessing to this felony, Chuck had a voice recorder hidden under the pillow. A cold move, but you gotta respect the play.
We don't want you to get into trouble.
Nothing super interesting happens in this one, apart from Mike spending the whole episode trying to find out how his car was being tracked. And when he does find the tracker in his petrol cap, you feel the same sense of accomplishment after you just had to watch him tear this car apart. Later that night, he wears down the battery on the tracker so that it alerts the owner to come and replace it. This trick allows Mike to start following this mystery person. On the subject of batteries, one more thing to mention is that Ernesto accidentally plays the tape recording of Jimmy while he was helping Chuck to change the batteries.
Turn that off! Turn it off!
It all went
Turn it off!
exactly.
You did not hear that!
Honestly, I feel really bad for Ernesto. He's always trying to help Chuck the best he can, but he barks at Ernesto like he's his personal butler.
Can I get you something?
Ernesto, come in here, please.
Just take it easy.
Ernesto.
Well, you had me at old people. Hey, here's a question. Can you start today?
Mike spends the entire episode following the GPS tracker to find out who's keeping tabs on him, and it's a sequence that feels like it takes forever, with a painfully slow pace. And I guess that's the point. You're meant to feel the time passing like Mike does, but still it kinda makes for a boring watch.
1990.
The highlight of this is when he hires Jimmy to go inside Los Pollos Hermanos. This is one of the places where the GPS carrier stops, and Mike wants Jimmy to pretend to be a customer so he can take note of what the guy does while he stops here. His terrible attempt at acting casual is super funny. Especially watching him pour about 9 sugars into his coffee, then still having to drink it to not raise suspicion. Jimmy and Kim interview a secretary called Fran, and we already see that there are conflicts with Jimmy's full steam ahead attitude and Kim's cautious approach.
Hey, here's a question. Can you start today?
Yes?
Fantastic.
No, can you just give us a second, Francesca?
Later on, Ernesto tells Kim about the recording he heard, not knowing if he would be in legal trouble telling Jimmy directly. Kim then forces Jimmy to give her some money so that she can tell him what she heard as his lawyer.
Jimmy, there's a tape.
What?
There is a tape recording of you talking to Chuck.
Jimmy tries to not let this betrayal get to him, and honestly, he shouldn't be that mad. He did the wrong thing first, bear in mind. But families are complicated, and reason kinda goes out the window when feelings are hurt. Jimmy kicks in his door and demands the tape, furious at the trick he pulled.
For this, you destroyed our family? You have me now for what? For nothing!
Little did he know, Chuck was expecting this visit, so he hired a PI to be on site at all times so that he can be a witness to the break-in. The episode ends with Mike finding a phone with the tracker, signalling that he's been spotted by his target.
Yeah.
One? No. Yeah.
Gus arrives on scene to reveal himself as the mystery tracker. He likes that Mike hurt Hector's business, but he demands that he stops his attempts to kill him. Gus's interests in keeping him alive will become clearer later on. From here, they agree that Mike will continue to hurt the Salamanca business, with Gus watching over what he does. His first trick is to fill some shoes with drugs, and then he throws them over some power lines in the place where the truck stops. Then Mike shoots holes in the shoes to allow the drugs to sprinkle down on the truck. At the border, sniffer dogs will pick up the trace amounts of drug that hasn't been blown off by the wind, and that's job done. Chuck is pressing charges on Jimmy, and while he awaits his first hearing, we get to see Jimmy having some banter with his old fellow defense attorney.
I'll see if I can work some magic, but those decisions are really above my pay grade.
Oh yeah? When did they start paying you?
When Jimmy is out on bail, he talks to this guy again, and the way he eats his food really bothers me. He's sitting here with 2 different bags of crisps, pressing the packets together like he's eating a 2-flavour sherbet dip. And what the hell is this face he's making? It's so strange. Please stop eating like this. And then when Jimmy sits down with his burger, he looks at Jimmy's chips like he's a starving seagull and swoops in the second Jimmy offers him one. And then to top it all off, when Jimmy doesn't want to eat his burger anymore, he practically snatches it out his hands. His name's Bill, by the way. I'm pretty sure he comes back into the show later on, so kinda needed to know his name. Jimmy refuses Kim as his lawyer, as he doesn't want her wrapped up in his mess. But Kim insists on showing her undying love and support, and he's going to need it because Chuck is trying to get him disbarred instead of simply having him in jail. Which, if Chuck is successful, this will be the worst case scenario for Jimmy.
Now we take that PPD and we shove it right up Chuck's ass.
Oh, Sabrosito.
There's a meeting between the dons of the cartel, and Hector's contribution to the head don, Don Eladio, is dwarfed by Bolsa's.
Todo esto en solo un mes.
Él es un genio de la distribución.
¿Ves, Héctor? Está impresionante, ¿no?
¿Eso qué?
Es ok. Me parece que alguien está un poco celoso.
And it's here that we see Hector getting angry at Gustavo's success, being the lead distributor under Bolsa. As we know, Hector's contribution is smaller due to Mike's sabotage, and while Hector is powerless to do anything about this, not knowing who's behind it, he can try to muscle in on other territories, naturally picking on Gus Fring. This scene of him demanding to see Fring inside of Los Pollos Hermanos is simply amazing.
Sir, you're not allowed back here.
The intimidation you feel, despite him not doing anything physically threatening, is a credit to his character and the acting skills of Mark Margolis? It's one of those. Kim is painstakingly ringing every repair company in the area to find out who Chuck has hired to repair his door. When she finds the right guy and cancels the appointment, Jimmy hires Mike to act as the repairman, with the mission being to take pictures of Chuck's living conditions, the purpose of which will become clear very soon. The pre-prosecution agreement meeting is underway, and Jimmy looks very hurt to be sat here while his brother finalises the terms. To add salt to the wound, the court lady insists that Jimmy verbally apologises to Chuck right here, right now, and the way in which he words this apology is very clever.
I regret it all of it, more than you can imagine, because you're my brother, and no one should treat his own brother like that. Not ever.
Notice how he said this in a way that makes Chuck seem equally as guilty as he is. At the end of the meeting, Kim fishes out information confirming that Chuck has a backup tape recording from the one that Jimmy destroyed. So now they can prepare for the next steps, knowing that Chuck will be submitting the audio in evidence.
Bingo.
You think this is bad? This chicanery? He's done worse.
This may well be the most important episode of Better Call Saul. It's certainly up there as one of my favourites. The majority of the episode takes place inside the courtroom, where Jimmy's lawyer licence hangs by a thread. At first, things aren't looking too good for Jimmy, as the court hears his confession tape in evidence. Chuck argues that there's no way Jimmy can claim the voice on the tape is not his, and Jimmy agrees to this. But then he puts forward the idea that he only made the confession to calm Chuck's mental breakdown.
You think your house is normal? Can I call your attention to Exhibit 9? There's a lantern on top of newspapers. You call this normal?
And that even though he was playing up his condition at the time, he still suffers from a mental condition rather than a physical condition. Now here's where Jimmy's genius strikes again. He hired Hugh Babineau to bump into Chuck on the stairwell and slip a phone battery into his pocket.
What do I have to do to prove it to you?
I don't know, Chuck. Could you reach into your breast pocket and tell me what's there? His name is Hugh Babineau. He's on our witness list. You bumped into him in the stairway. He'll testify he planted this fully charged battery on you over an hour and a half ago, and you felt nothing.
No. It's a trick. It has
Enough
to.
isn't.
Then Chuck really damages his case by blowing up in court over how much he resents Jimmy.
And he gets to be a lawyer? What a sick joke. And you have to stop him.
This whole thing was amazing to watch. Of course, this doesn't mean Jimmy is off the hook, but this brilliant defensive play massively lowers the punishment he will receive. Closing out the court case, Kim gives an awe-inspiring speech about how Jimmy has served the community by helping the elderly make better wheels, and it's inspiring to listen to because she's right. This emotional plea works on the judges too, as they don't revoke his license. Instead, they give him a 1-year suspension from practicing law. So Kim and Jimmy celebrate in style, with champagne and coffee mugs. Rebecca, who Jimmy flew in to be at the hearing, is concerned for Chuck as he's not answering the door. But Jimmy doesn't care to hear about Chuck right now and shows no concern for his well-being.
Jimmy, he's still your brother.
Not anymore, he's not.
Jimmy gets to work, calling all his clients to inform them of his 1-year absence, and in doing so realises that he still has a TV ad running, which if not taken down immediately will land him in trouble. The problem with pulling the ad, however, is that Jimmy will have essentially wasted his money, as he's already signed onto a contract. So he brings back the film crew and goes around selling airtime to small businesses. Jimmy, realising that he can't advertise airtime under the name Jimmy McGill, switches to using his favourite pseudonym, Saul Goodman.
I can make you a TV star for a price you can afford. Call me, Saul Goodman. The world needs to know about you and your business. Call me now.
Hector is rubbing people the wrong way again, forcing Nacho to involve his father in the drug trade by insisting that they use his business as a front, and he also manages to annoy Gus by having Nacho collect more product than he is typically supplied with.
Give it to him.
Sure.
Give it to him.
Nacho notices that whenever Hector has a temper flare, he has to take his heart medication, and this will come into play later. Gus is scoping out an industrial laundrette for sale. Breaking Bad fans will already know exactly what this place becomes. For the rest of you watching, it will be a cool reveal. The episode ends with Chuck pushing his limits to get to a nearby payphone so he can phone a doctor. It seems the defeat in court has pushed him into realising that his condition is a mental one.
I need to see Dr. Cruz as soon as possible.
Jimmy faces the reality of his situation in this one. He begins his community service, but doesn't get his time signed off because he was on the phone for almost the entire time trying to sell airtime.
That's not enough time!
With that business venture, he's having trouble getting people to buy a substantial amount to make it worth his time and effort. Emphasis on the word effort, as we see him rushing between community service and filming, having to use wet ones to wipe off the trash stains. The final client flat out refuses to pay for anything, so Jimmy offers it to him for free, on the promise that they will use his services again if this free trial is successful. We get this sweet moment at the end of this conversation where the makeup girl offers her payment back, seeing Jimmy so beat down by this crappy day.
But you're losing money.
We'll see. It'll be fine.
Nacho breaks into Lester's house to talk to him about doing business again. He wants to buy Hector's medication so that he can tamper with the pills. Lester goes to hire Mike's protection again, not wanting Nacho to rip him off like the last time. But Mike has other stuff going on now. He's working 2 jobs essentially, and he's also trying to support Kaylee's mum by attending grief counselling with her. Also, he's got this potential love interest brewing. Trying to limit his outgoings, Jimmy tries to get a refund on his malpractice insurance for the amount of time that he won't be using it, but the insurance company says it's against their policy. Jimmy then breaks down, saying how tough it's been for him since Chuck started losing his mind and making filing mistakes in court.
My brother is sick, and he's alone.
An honest enough looking breakdown, but secretly he wants Chuck's insurance premiums to skyrocket, just as a last little FU. Mike is metal detecting to find the wedding ring of the truck driver that Hector killed, and when he finds what he's looking for, he reports it to the police to hopefully get Hector in hot water again. Back home, he realises that his stockpile of cash is getting out of hand, and he needs to find a way to spend it without being flagged by the taxman. So he asks Gus if he can be on the payroll. Gus turns down the offer, but says he will come up with a way to help him. Jimmy is getting more pushback from the guitar shop guys, who said they would pay him for more ads, since their free trial was a massive success. They essentially say they don't need him anymore, but Jimmy won't just lie down and let them walk all over him. Instead, he purposefully falls down, after a misplaced drumstick tripped him up.
You guys have liability insurance, right?
So Jimmy walks away with the cash he needs and a sweet new guitar. Chuck is trying his hardest to push his recovery speed, now that he's aware of the reality behind his condition.
And I'm gonna get these lights turned back on. I want this house to be full of music. I want to have a dinner party.
There's a cool moment of progress where he goes to the supermarket and endures the pain of all the bright lights to successfully leave with a bag of groceries.
Are those groceries?
They are. I decided to go for a little walk.
That's great, Chuck. Let's go in. Thank you.
And despite what you feel about Chuck as a character, it's hard not to be happy for him in this moment. The most intense part of this episode is seeing Nacho swap out Hector's heart medication for the fake pills. Seeing him shakily swap pills from pot to pot, and then having to somehow get them back in Hector's pocket. This was edge of your seat stuff. You can feel how anxious Nacho is to take Hector out before he starts using his dad's business for trafficking. Nacho's love for his dad is such a key element of his character, which will develop more as the episodes go on.
You haven't accepted this.
Jimmy returns to Sandpiper to visit his old client, Mrs. Landry, and he finds out that she hasn't agreed on the settlement because she was advised to hold out until they offer more, which means Jimmy has to keep on waiting until he gets his cut. Of course, in his position right now, he can't advise her to settle as it would be illegal, but what he can do is make her enemy number one with the other residents. Here's how it goes down. First, he gifts her a nice pair of trainers, so that to the other residents it looks like she's living in luxury, while they are struggling financially. Then the next move is Jimmy talks to the other residents to make them realise that Mrs. Landry, as their representative, has complete control over the settlement. So they all start to turn on her, believing that she's being greedy by holding out. It's all pretty slick stuff. But this is super heartbreaking to see this old woman crying as she's lost all her friends.
They've all turned on me. What should I do? Should I settle?
You listen to your heart.
Settle, settle, settle. More heartbreak comes as we see Nacho telling his dad that Hector will be taking control of his business and he needs to be compliant with this.
Yo te juro que terminará pronto.
The disappointment in his dad's face and Nacho fighting back tears to be stern about the situation is heavy, heavy stuff. And then we have even more heartbreak seeing Howard asking Chuck to retire, as the malpractice insurance situation is costing the whole firm greatly. Howard really suffers here because he has nothing but respect and love for Chuck and doesn't want him to leave, but it's in everyone's best interest that he does. Instead of accepting the situation, Chuck decides to sue HHM.
God damn it, Chuck.
Kim is also going through a rough patch, trying to cover a new client that Mesa Verde recommended. Kim, already dealing with so much and working herself to the point of no sleep, falls asleep at the wheel. This terrifying cut is excellent. It really puts you in the shoes of someone losing track of time due to sleep deprivation, and the extreme shock you would feel after crashing like this. Gus's solution to Mike's money problem is to have him work as a contractor for Madrigal, the corporation who owns Los Pollos Hermanos, and his shady cash flow will look official with the help of Lydia, Gus's inside man, woman. Kim is recovering from her crash, and she realises that overworking herself like this puts her life and other lives in danger. So she cancels her appointments and schedules some Kim time, renting a ton of movies from Blockbuster. Remember that place?
Okay, how many do I have? 9? Good.
Get yourself a woman who still looks this attractive after a car crash and watches this many movies for fun. Hector begins his takeover of Nacho's dad's business, and he is greeted with hostility.
Por favor. Váyase de mi taller.
Mi papá, por favor.
The stones on this man to stand up to a cartel boss just makes you appreciate his character so much more. Later that evening, Hector has a meeting with Bolsa and Gus to contest the idea that all the trafficking will be done through Gus's business, actively defying the instructions of Don Eladio. Hector works himself into such a state that he has a heart attack after taking the fake pills.
This isn't personal.
It is! It is personal!
Call 911. Stash the guns.
Jimmy makes a really confusing choice in this episode that maybe someone watching can help me understand. So he feels bad for Mrs. Landry, since the other women are still ostracising her over the settlement situation, claiming that she's only now settling to get back into their good books. So Jimmy sets up a scene where he accidentally leaves his mic on, revealing his devious plot to get her to settle.
You took advantage of poor Mrs. Landry.
Does she know how much money you're gonna make from this?
Nope. And again, I ask, so what?
These people trusted you, Jimmy.
Which causes the women to see that Mrs. Landry was manipulated, and she withdraws on the settlement. I do understand that he did this because he felt guilty, but this means he won't get his cut of the money, which I thought he needed to keep himself afloat, since he's not going to be practicing law for the next year. I always felt Jimmy was more self-serving than this, but despite my confusion, this exposure scene was super funny.
If the only thing standing between me and $1 million is some old lady's tears, then I suggest investing in Kleenex.
Shame on you.
The not so funny part of this show is watching Chuck start to fall backwards after such promising progress. Howard digs into his own pockets to pay off Chuck so they can settle this dispute out of court. And just like that, Chuck is out of HHM.
All right, then. Let's give him a hand.
Again, Howard doesn't do this with pride, but instead bitter necessity. And you can't help but agree that Chuck is being a massive douche in this situation. Howard deserved better. After that, Jimmy comes round to make sure Chuck's okay, as he's reached a point of wanting to put the past behind him and be brothers again. But Chuck doesn't see it this way. He thinks Jimmy is a lost cause, just looking to spurt platitudes seeking forgiveness, while not looking to make any changes to the way he behaves. Chuck signs off this conversation in the coldest way imaginable.
I don't want to hurt your feelings. But the truth is, you've never mattered all that much to me.
Chuck's mental state begins to collapse as he finds himself unable to sleep in a house receiving electricity again. So then he starts tearing out cables from the walls until he finds every last trace of power. At the end of this rampage, he looks like a broken man. He's lost all progress, he's lost all his family and friends, and he sees only one option left. Chuck kicks over a lamp and burns with the rest of the house. A massively tragic end to his character and this season. Jimmy, or Gene as he's known in this flash forward, collapsed at work and is now admitted to hospital. Paranoia setting in as he's now in a place where his personal records will be examined. On the way out, he gets stopped to confirm his driver's license, and after an intense minute of investigating an error on the secretary's screen, it turns out nothing was wrong.
I typed the letter O instead of a 0. I can't believe I was stupid.
Then in the cab home, he spots an Albuquerque air freshener and freaks out about the cabbie locking eyes with him. A very good opening sequence that shows how stressful life can be living on the run. Jimmy rushes to Chuck's house, but it's too late.
Jimmy, go.
It's a really interesting choice to not have Jimmy break down crying here. It would have been simple to just have a big emotional collapse here, but it's far more interesting to see Jimmy in a state of confused shock, and then watch his emotions change through the different stages of grief. He pushes himself away from talking about it with Howard, and at the funeral he remains calm and solemn as he greets the guests.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Thanks, Brian.
I imagine we were all expecting to see the actual funeral, but instead it cuts to the drive home. And this is probably to present the idea that Jimmy remained on this emotional level throughout the speeches. Before we move on, one cool detail about the funeral is that we can hear the same song that Chuck liked to play on piano. That's a nice touch. Mike is relaxing at home, trying to enjoy his financial freedom. He has Kaylee over to do some gardening, and you'll never guess what she says when it's home time.
Hey.
Hey.
You two having fun?
5 more minutes, please.
5 more minutes, but that's it.
Mike soon appears bored of sitting around at home, so he decides to do some actual security work at Madrigal, which also helps him to become a familiar face at the company, just in case any auditors start asking questions. At the end of the episode, and this time this part actually is the end of the episode, I apologise for my earlier screw-ups, editor me, Howard reveals that Chuck likely took his own life after being fired due to the insurance problem. A moment of connecting cause and effect for Jimmy, as he hadn't previously considered this outcome from his actions. Jimmy deals with this by allowing Howard to believe that it was just because he was fired.
Well, Howard, I guess that's your cross to bear.
Gus is keeping a close eye on Hector's condition, as he doesn't want him to die under these circumstances.
Isn't this what he deserves? I decide what he deserves.
He sends in a specialist doctor to provide Hector with the best chance of getting out of the coma, and the family could not be more pleased to see her.
Les pido que le hablen a Héctor. Ayla probably da aquí en cierto nivel.
Jimmy is hastily jumping back into normality by insisting that he goes out job hunting. His first interview is at a printer shop, interviewed by 2 familiar faces from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. We got creepy Uncle Jack.
You can share the room with me, Charlie. It'll be fun. You know, you and me palling around, getting nuts, doing crazy
I'm not doing any kind of things that you want me to do with you, Uncle Jack.
And the waiter.
We'll take the snapper. This guy too, he's with us.
Well, as I told this gentleman only moments ago, we are out of fish today.
And you can bet your sweet cheeks I'll be making a video on this show. But for now, back to Better Call Saul. So he turns down the job even though they offered it to him because he feels they were persuaded too easily by his pitch, which cheapens the reward of being offered the job. He does, however, spot a valuable Hummel on their shelf, which he later values online at just under $9,000. Wonder what he's planning. Representing Jimmy, Kim attends a meeting to discuss Chuck's estate. And no surprise here, but Chuck left Jimmy with the bare minimum. Howard says that he would gladly have Jimmy on the board of a scholarship that Chuck set up to financially support a promising new lawyer. And Kim has a full-blown meltdown at Howard for being so insensitive.
Kim, I don't think that's fair.
Fair? Let's talk about fair. You want him to serve on the board of a scholarship committee? A scholarship that Chuck never in a million years would have given to Jimmy.
I do feel a bit bad for Howard though. He clearly wasn't trying to upset anyone. He's just doing his job. The only thing of sentimental value that Chuck left behind for Jimmy was a letter, but Kim decides to hold on to it for now to allow them to have a chilled out evening, taking his mind off of things with a little bit of intercourse. Kaylee is enjoying the swings down the park, with Pop keeping a close eye on her. Oh no, someone call an ambulance, quick. And you're not gonna believe what happens next. And also this.
All right, baby. Time to get you back to your mama.
5 more minutes?
Oh, honey, come on.
I enjoy being right. Okay, enough with the silly stuff for a moment, as we see bad haircut Billy trying to take the extra pack like Hector demanded. But with Hector out of action, Gus isn't playing these games anymore and takes him out in a very horrible way. As Nacho is forced to watch his friend suffocate to death, Gus reveals that he knows it was Nacho who put Hector into hospital. Not sure how he sussed this one out, but he did.
From now on, you are mine.
Gus orders Tyrus and Victor to stage a shootout to make it look like someone shot bad haircut Billy. But the even more messed up part is Nacho willingly gets shot to make it seem like someone put a hit out on a cartel, which successfully gets Bolsa on high alert, demanding that Fring traffics drugs in a new way while they get to the bottom of this attack. The Silent Twins find Nacho looking like E.T. dying on the side of the road, so they rush him to get emergency treatment from the shady vet, and he manages to save his life in the back of a dirty warehouse.
After I walk out of here, I never want to see you again. This cartel shit is too hot for me.
Jimmy hires a thief to steal the Hummel, and in a funny twist, creepy Uncle Jack is sleeping in the office.
Are you still delivering? Oh, yeah, just a large cheese. Could you also throw in some dipping sticks? 2 ranch and 1 marinara.
When he leaves the room for a moment, Thiefman rings Jimmy and urges him to come help. His solution is to pick the lock on Jack's car and send him running after it.
Hey!
Later the next morning, Kim and her new paralegal, Viola, are prepping for the day when Jimmy walks in for breakfast. Kim waits back to check in with him and to hand him the letter, which he flippantly reads there and then, like it's nothing more than the morning newspaper.
New paragraph. We have not always seen eye to eye. I expect that will continue to be so in the future. However, nothing will ever change the fact that we are brothers, flesh and blood.
Kim reacts very strongly hearing Chuck's pleasant words that he wrote for Jimmy many years ago, way before their big fallout. And to many people, myself included, this was a confusing reaction from Kim.
Just give me a minute.
I did some research and found a Reddit post with many theories being exchanged, and the best answer I can see is that Kim was expecting it to be a horrible letter and was building up a certain level of anxiety handing it over, but instead it was praise from a better time in Jimmy's life, and Kim feels awful that things went so wrong between them, and she was a big part of that. Last part to mention is that we get to see Gal again, a fairly meaningless appearance for new people to the Breaking Bad universe, but essentially he's Gus's talented chemist friend who helps him test drug purity levels.
I could do much better.
Gail.
Much higher grade. I could make a kilo or more right here. No one would know.
Jimmy gets a job working as a manager of a mobile phone shop, but business is practically non-existent at this branch, so Jimmy gets bored pretty quickly. To get customers in the door, he goes back to his old tricks by stepping outside of his boundaries to paint the shop windows with an enticing sales pitch that would titillate the interests of any conspiracy nuts and drug dealers. Nacho makes up a story that the guys who jumped him were one of Gus's rival gangs. So the silent twins go full Terminator mode and wipe out the entire building by themselves.
¡Ríndanse, güeyes! ¡Es la única forma de que salgan vivos!
The main star of this episode is Mike. At a grief counselling session, he calls out a guy who he believes is making up his tragic story. Mike has just finished listening to his daughter-in-law talking about her finally letting go of Matty, and he's not going to now listen to this guy's BS.
And I'll get the papers from 1997 and I'll run a search on Judy DeVore, beloved wife of Henry DeVore. Tell me I'll find her obituary. You wanted me to talk. I talked.
Gus is angry at Mike for not telling him about Nacho's plot against Hector, but Mike defends his position, saying it wasn't his job to babysit Hector, he was just told not to kill him. Jimmy makes his first sale of the Paranoid As You Go burner phones, and this inspires him to cook the books and take to the streets to sell more phones for a profit. At first all goes well. He smooth talks his way into selling a batch to this biker gang outside of Doghouse, real restaurant by the way. But at the end of the night, he gets mugged by some flannel shirt fucks, who he tried selling to earlier. For some reason, Kim is taking on extra cases as a defense attorney, acting as if she didn't just crash from overworking. Luckily this time, the only damage done is that she annoys Mesa Verde by not being available when they need her.
When we need you, we need you. We're not a client you hang up on.
Gus and Mike are in the recruitment process, looking for a competent architect to build a secret room under the laundrette. The first guy, a cocky French fella, thinks he can do it no problem, and boasts about how he built a secret tunnel before, not realising that he just made this secret tunnel not a secret. So Gus, who is listening nearby, calls in to say he's not the one. Then a quirky German fella named Werner Ziegler has the correct approach of caution and setting realistic expectations. So he's in. Werner Ziegler and his construction buddies are inducted into their home away from home, where Mike has gone to great lengths to ensure they can unwind after their hard day's work. One of the guys, called Kai, an arrogant little twerp, is already acting up.
We have a few things to go over here. That means you too.
Kai. Sie zahlen euch gutes Geld, dafür hört ihr gefälligst zu.
Kim, realising she needs help handling Mesa Verde, considers an opportunity to be partners at Schweikart and Coakley, news of which Jimmy finds hard to stomach, as he was looking forward to a future where they worked alongside each other. Jimmy goes to collect his cheque from Chuck's estate and sees that HHM are suffering from the cost of losing Chuck. Jimmy, instead of walking away, decides to criticise Howard for his lack of optimism, and Howard rightfully barks back at him, as he has no right to be sticking his oar in.
Fuck you, Jimmy. There you go. Use that.
Gus pays a visit to Hector as he gets word that an infection has made his condition critical. He sits there and tells him a story from his childhood, where he captured an animal that was eating his fruit supply, and instead of killing it, he kept it alive as a punishment. The sinister message of this story is bone-chilling, and he's got huge balls for revealing this to Hector, considering that he will eventually wake up from this coma. I would say spoiler, but come on, you already knew this. Jimmy tries to make a deal with the flannel shirt kids, but they try and mug him again, something of which Jimmy was counting on.
You should have taken the deal. You're like the stupidest person I've ever met.
They get hung up like piñatas and scared into leaving Jimmy alone for good.
We're sorry, man, all right? We're sorry.
Yeah, you are. Very much so.
We get a really cool opening montage showing how Kim and Jimmy are slowly drifting apart now that they're both back to working full time. As the title suggests, the song choice here is Something Stupid by Frank and Nancy Sinatra, and I can't play you even a single second of it. But take my word for it, this song works perfectly alongside this great directing and editing. Within this sequence, we see how Kim has taken the job at S&C while still doing the defense attorney stuff, and we see Jimmy is fully invested in his burner phone business, hiring Huel as security. Later on, Kim and Jimmy attend some party at S&C, and Jimmy ends up embarrassing Kim by being a bit over the top with his conversation. That's like pulling the pin on a grenade and being mad at it for exploding. Hector is finally awake, and Gus's doctor is training him to communicate again. Looks like the horny part of his brain is fully functional as he ogles this dump truck backing up to him. Gus reviews the recording of him doing this and decides that his archenemy has been treated enough. While on duty, Huel sees a guy confronting Jimmy and clobbers him round the head, not realising he's a cop. So Huel freaks out and says he's going to go on the run if Jimmy can't get him out of jail time. Jimmy reaches out to Kim as he's unable to defend Huel, and Kim starts gathering stationery for an idea that she has in mind. Jimmy's on a bus to Louisiana, and on the way he recruits passengers to write fake letters supporting Huel using the supplies Kim picked up.
I like your passion, but would you just maybe tone down the anger? Make it that you're sad that you even have to write the letter.
At first I found it kind of weird that Kim would put herself on the line like this. It's not like Huel's case should really mean anything to her. It's a really big risk her being involved in this shady work, with not much reward at the end. But at the end, she says something that changes my perspective. In the meantime, the judge receives all these letters, and he fears that this small case could turn into a massive headache. So the rival lawyer starts investigating the people behind these letters. The people being Jimmy and his film crew, acting with multiple personalities.
The court has received numerous letters from members of your congregation in regards to Mr. Huel Babineau.
What kind of person would you say Mr. Babineau is?
Well, I say he's a lovely person, both inside and out.
Nacho is covering Hector's position at the taco restaurant, with Crazy 8 covering Nacho's old role as money collector. There's a grim moment where one of the dealers comes up short, and Nacho rips out his earring as a warning. Then he goes home, and it's cool that we get to see where Nacho lives. As soon as he gets through the door, two skanky meth chicks offer to cook him dinner, before returning to rubbing their gross grubby feet all over his nice leather sofas. I'm sorry, is this episode called Nacho's House in Heaven? The next day, Nacho returns to the taco restaurant and sees a mystery man has overtaken the kitchen. His name is Lalo Salamanca, yet another nephew of Hector's. Nacho kinda dies inside, realising he has yet another Salamanca to deal with, and this one doesn't have any heart problems.
What are you doing here? I'm just here to lend a helping hand, you know, make sure the business is running in order. I got a good head for numbers.
Mike is acting as chaperone to the Germans, with the younger virile ones having a good time at a stripper bar, and Werner goes to a regular boobless bar.
Prost.
Mike gets word that Kai is being a nuisance, so he pays off the bouncer and demands Kai goes back to the base. And of course Kai is being a leery little shit about it.
Go on, try me. Get him out of here.
When Mike returns to Werner, he's drunkenly telling a bunch of strangers about a non-specific construction job he's involved with. Poor Mike was just trying to give these guys some rest and relaxation, and it's turned into a complete nightmare. I thought Germans were famous for being able to handle their booze. He gives Werner a final warning about secrecy and the consequences for compromising the operation.
The man we're working for is very serious. Think about the precautions we take to keep everything that goes on here quiet.
Jimmy tells Kim that he wants this to be the last time they do anything dodgy, but Kim gets all passionate whenever they have to be naughty with the law, so she says no, we're doing this again, bitch. Kim and Jimmy are already on the next scam to get planning permission for an extra Mesa Verde branch or something. I'll be honest, I don't really find the Mesa Verde stuff that interesting, which is why I haven't really talked about it too much. Kim's acting here, which is to say the acting of Rhea Seahorn, is really convincing.
Oh my god. No, Sherry, I can't show this. All right. Oh my god, they're going to text. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do.
You really believe she's a stressed out single mother trying to repair the damage of her mistake at work. Lalo is keeping things in order. His first visit is with Uncle Hector, who is now wheelchair bound, and Lalo gifts him his iconic bell.
What the?
Then he goes to Gustavo with no real goal other than making his presence known, to say that the Salamancas are still very much in the game. I really like Lalo's method of intimidation. He does it with this over-friendly assertiveness. Like, when he asks for something, you really feel like he's not just asking you, he's actually threatening you.
Is there any chance, and I know the answer is probably no, but is it possible for me to meet the owner?
I am the owner.
Really? How lucky for me.
He's got a chicken farm way out of town.
Show me.
Jimmy has his hearing to reinstate him as a lawyer, and he does a good job with his iconic smooth talking, but the board denies him on the grounds that he's not being very sincere. He then goes off rambling to Kim, and she points out that he should have mentioned Chuck when talking about his influences in the law, and he flies off the handle saying Chuck is irrelevant to him now, so why would he bring him up? He gets frustrated to the point where he bites at Kim for supposedly not supporting him 100% because she didn't want to be law partners with him, and Kim bites back harder with incredible accuracy.
Who comes running when you call? Who cleans up your messes? I have a job, but I drop everything for you. And maybe next time you call, I won't come.
There you go. Kick him in when he's down.
Jimmy, you are always down.
The Germans successfully pull off a controlled explosion, and everyone seems happy, except Werner. When Mike goes to check on him, he says he misses his wife and wants a weekend absence to go see her. Mike says no, just get your work done quicker and then you can go see her. So that evening, Werner manages to escape using a laser pointer to blind the cameras. Another amazing flashback to open the episode. We see Jimmy celebrating being sworn in as a lawyer, and this moment is special because we see Jimmy and Chuck having a good time as brothers. They sing together at karaoke and then drunkenly stumble back to a hotel room.
I was in your arms, thinking I belonged there.
This scene makes Chuck's death even sadder to think about, and this perfectly sets our mood for the things to come in this episode. First, we'll talk about Mike hunting down Werner. He stops at a nearby wire transfer place, and after looking at the CCTV, he sees Werner got into a cab, but he can't see the cab company name. He listens to the recorded phone conversation Werner had with his wife, and they spoke about him going to a spa, so Mike takes the pamphlets next to the phone and gets calling around the local spas to find him. Hot on his trail is Lalo, who's been following him around to see what Gus's people are up to, and Mike manages to shake him in a really genius way. He takes a ticket from the gated car park, and then on his way out, jams the machine with chewing gum, so Lalo gets stuck in the queue behind him. Lalo knocks out the money wire guy and sees Mike taking brochures on the CCTV and uses the same methods to track down Werner so he can try and fish out information.
It's very straightforward. Kai will not...
Unfortunately for Werner, he has caused too much of a risk for Gus, and Mike insists on being the one to take him out as humanely as he can.
There are so many stars visible in New Mexico. I will walk out there to get a better look.
Jimmy is trying his hardest to win the board's approval. His first tactic is to be more present in the community Chuck left behind. He pays for a new reading room dedicated to Chuck, and he attends the one-year memorial at his headstone with the least convincing upset voice I've ever heard.
Still doesn't make any sense.
God bless.
Bless you. Very thoughtful.
And then he sits on the board of the scholarship to help award it to the brightest student. And it's here that we get an unexpected development on Jimmy's grief. So Jimmy voted for the underdog student who had a minor criminal past, siding with her purely because she reminds him of his younger self. But the board ultimately votes against her, and this keeping the underdog down moment brought back a lot of painful memories and feelings for Jimmy, causing him to finally break down in his car. After those very real tears, Jimmy goes to the appeal of his hearing and gives a moving speech about how tough Chuck was to please, but he always tried to make him proud.
If you made him proud, wow, What a feeling. And he let you know it too. I'm lucky. I got this letter. I never had a chance to write him a letter and to tell him all the things that I should have.
This was so effective that even Kim starts welling up, and then she gets punched right in the gut when she realizes he meant none of it.
I had this energy going through me. It was like improv or jazz, and then boom, I sunk the hook in.
And then out of nowhere, he decides that with his reinstatement, he's going to practice under the name Saul Goodman. This leaves Kim feeling completely disconnected with the man she was just crying for. And look at this perfect cinematography to reflect that emotion.
I stay Saul Goodman. They call the guy they already know.
After the cabbie incident, he spots Jimmy on his lunch break and begs for him to stop pretending that he's not Saul Goodman.
Come on, man. I just want to say hi. I'm a big fan. You know, back in the day when I lived in Albuquerque with my ex, I used to see you everywhere.
Jimmy panics and rings the vacuum guy to get another new identity, but right before he's about to seal the deal, he decides he's done enough running.
I'm gonna fix it myself.
Back to present time, Jimmy signs off on the name change, explaining that his new type of scumbag clients know him only as Saul Goodman. Kim is trying to be supportive about it, but she also believes that this will cheapen his lawyer status that he worked on so hard all year to get back. And while I agree with her, I also agree with what Saul says in response.
Jimmy McGill, the lawyer, is always going to be Chuck McGill's loser brother. I'm done with that. That name is burned.
Saul gets down to some sleazy work by giving out burner phones to new clients, and I find it hilarious to look at this variety of criminals all queuing up and hanging out together in the same part of town. We got bikers alongside cowboys and drag queens, and also homeless drug addicts and cholos. It's kinda silly to look at. Gus is getting tired of Lalo snooping around, so he calls a meeting to address his concerns. In preparation for his questions about the secret building, he gets the German guys to mock up a fake new building and claim that this building was his big secret.
Gustavo, there can be no more secrets.
Yes.
You can tell by Lalo's reaction that he doesn't completely buy into this story. Being the ever cautious man, Gus demands that the crew is sent back to Germany until Lalo is out of the picture. And as they collect their plane tickets, Kai disrespectfully says taking Werner out was a smart choice.
He was a good man, but in truth, he was soft.
Then the next guy, respectful to Werner's honor, basically spits in Mike's face.
He was worth 50 of you.
You're done. You are done!
With Saul's special 50% off deal, two scragheads take it as a green light to go on a rampage of taking drugs, pissing in the street, and robbing a gas station. Does their plan make sense? Not at all. But that's the magic of crystal meth, kids. Nacho gets a surprise nighttime visit from Gus's crew, and I take him to his dad's hangout spot.
Hey, wait! Wait! Hey, wait! Why is he doing this?
Okay, I get it.
Gus wants him to be an informant, keeping him updated on whatever Lalo is planning. I don't really get why this threat was necessary. Gus already knows Nacho wants out of the Salamanca business, and he's already made it quite clear that Nacho will do as he's told, or face the consequences just like bad haircut Billy did. So Gus really could have just asked him. This move was overkill. Nacho does express, however, that Lalo doesn't involve him in decision making, so Gus tells him to find a way to earn his trust. An opportunity to do this comes when the police arrest Crazy 8 after they caught him helping out with a deal. Nacho sneaks into the place that the police are about to raid so he can get to the drugs before they do.
Did they get him? They must have got... Ignacio Varga. Eres un chingón.
Mike and Kaylee are having a fun time putting grip onto stairs, and Mike starts losing his grip on being a good granddad when Kaylee keeps asking questions about her dad. Fresh off the guilt of murdering Werner and basically being called a scumbag for it, Kaylee saying that the bad guys killed her daddy sends him over the edge.
You're making a mess. You either do it right or you don't do it.
But I want to do it.
You're done. You are done!
5 more minutes?
Nah, I'm just kidding. But wouldn't that have been amazing? Saul's fully loaded with clients to handle, and the people who knew him as Jimmy are alarmed to see such a transformation. While walking down the road on the phone to one of his new clients, Nacho pulls up and demands he drops his ice cream and come talk business with him.
Make my tiny eyes grow wide with delight.
The episode opens with real-life close-up shots of red harvester ants, accompanied with music and sound design that creeps me out, but in a good way. Lalo insists that Saul takes on Domingo as a client, and Saul knows better than to turn down a member of the cartel. They come up with a plan for Domingo to offer up the location of dead drops in exchange for his release. A fine enough plan, except for the fact that this is Gus's money in these dead drops.
You want to leave the money for the feds?
If there's no money in those dead drops, Lalo will know someone talked.
The dead drops remain.
In the police interview, we get to see Hank Schrader and Steve Gomez from Breaking Bad, and it was awesome to see them bantering with each other again.
Once I found an old can of vanilla frosting, I ate that. I'm still here.
You what?
Hey, we were talking about expired food. I thought it was relevant.
Kim is dealing with an angry homeowner who refuses to let Mesa Verde build on what he claims is his land. And this guy is a major dick towards Kim, telling her to stop trying to trick him into leaving with what he believes to be mind games.
You'll say anything to get what you want, won't you?
Well, I guess he is right. Another wise old man is Nacho's dad, who believes Nacho gave someone money to buy his dad's business so that he can retire and stay out of harm's way, now that a Salamanca is back in the picture. And because Nacho's dad is a macho Chad, he refuses to walk away from his business just because of the Salamancas.
Si quieres oír, oye. Pero yo, ni madres, yo no voy a oír.
As much as you appreciate his dad's courage here, you can't help but feel bad for Nacho. He's a good boy, you know? And he could even be a good man if he got rid of this 8-year-old's racing car poster. Car goes vroom.
Come on, man, don't be like that. Hey, we're sorry, yo.
Saul meets the 50% off scragheads from earlier, and they're surprised to find out their long list of misdemeanors is going to cost them a lot of money, even with Saul's discount. I really like how Saul adjusts their attitudes about the situation they're in.
You're saying that you want a free lawyer? We're just talking over options.
Did you ever hear the phrase, you get what you pay for, you new Nick? Without me, they're gonna lock you up and throw away the key.
He then goes to lunch with Howard, unsure of why Howard wants to lunch with someone who he shares such a bitter history with. Howard seems to have experienced some enlightenment recently, as he now sees how he could have appreciated the hard work ethic of Jimmy McGill, and in an honest attempt to rectify this, he offers him a job at HHM. Saul doesn't give his answer yet, and agrees to think on it, and then Howard surprises him with a hug. Now here's where Saul does something that I think is super low, even for him. After the earnest attempt to make things right with the man he knew as Jimmy, Saul decides to throw bowling balls on his car. I was real life mad at him for doing this. This anger is only going to increase with what happens in the later episodes. Kim is trying to convince Mesa Verde to build somewhere else, because I think she feels bad for the old guy, and she gets Saul to convince him to hire Saul as his attorney. Yeah, this is all Mesa Verde stuff, so I'm going to skip over some of the details like I said before. Mike gets in a fist fight with some lowlives, who he grieves with as he walks home. The previous night, he almost broke one of their arms, so in retaliation, they stab him. He then wakes up in a mysterious, rustic-looking place in an unknown location.
I have to make a call.
Mike can't communicate with the Spanish-speaking cook to understand where he is and who is behind all of this, so he makes a run for it, impeded by his freshly treated knife wound, so he soon has to stop. Before long, Gus's doctor catches up to him and explains that he doesn't know why Gus is doing this. He's simply following orders in keeping Mike alive. Mike realises he's stuck here until he's back to full health, so he figures he might as well be nice to the locals here and help out with some repairs.
Tómelo con calma. No tiene por qué hacer eso. No sea terco.
It's okay. I'm fine.
Gus eventually arrives and tells him that he saved his life because he needs him to be his #1 soldier in a war that's soon to come. The bulk of this episode is Saul coming up with schemes to prevent Mesa Verde from building on his client's land, and it's pretty funny. My favourite scheme is when Saul smashes up and buries these plates and pretends that the land has to be protected while they verify if these cheap plates are in fact artifacts.
So what about it, Doctor?
Well, at a glance, I'd say these pieces are likely contemporary.
I'll bet they are.
I love how frustrated the builder gets, seeing how ridiculous these setbacks are.
Do I have to ask?
I'm gonna have to, you know.
The one who suffers the most from this is Kim, as she's facing pressures from Mesa Verde to keep fighting, instead of the owners just agreeing to build elsewhere. And Richard Schweikart isn't happy that she's remained on the case where Jimmy is now their opposition.
We'll be seeing a lot of each other. Till next time.
In this flashback, we see Kim as a young girl being let down by her alcoholic mum, who went out to have fun drinking, while Kim had to wait outside alone in the cold. And this gives some great background to show how Kim had to stand up for herself from an early age, forming the strong-willed, hard-working woman we see today. But on a deeper psychological level, it's important that we see her mother being this irresponsible person, because we see how Kim has adopted this trait in the way that she's been taking part in these schemes as an adult, risking the reputation and livelihood of a man and the bank he inherited from his dad, just so she can have her fun. As much as we don't like to admit it, we are a product of our parents and the experiences of being raised by them, and it's hard to escape becoming just like them in some ways. In the previous episode, Kim noticed that the Mesa Verde logo is similar to a woman's photography, and in this episode, Saul uses this as ammunition to show that he's going to be sticking around and being a pain in the arse, which will encourage Mesa Verde to settle, paying his client the money he would be willing to move out for. Although Kim was in on this plan, she didn't know how far Saul was going to push this, and she gets pissed at him.
We had a verbal agreement on a number that both sides would be happy with.
And I discussed the offer with my client, and he really doesn't want to leave his house.
I am also annoyed at Saul because he continues his attack on Howard, attempting to damage his image by paying hookers to pretend he owes them money and making a scene in this restaurant which is frequented by lawyers and judges.
I don't know you and owe no money to you. That's it.
Don't touch her! Don't!
No, Cliff, these are not my hookers.
Keep in mind, Howard was never really the person doing wrong by Jimmy. All of the decisions against Jimmy were driven by Chuck. Howard doesn't deserve this. Mike is back home and he's helping to get Lalo out of the picture. He sets up a scenario where an eyewitness to the wire transfer guy being murdered comes forward to the police with information about Lalo's car, and then he calls in a sighting on the radio using his old policeman know-how, and this is how Lalo gets arrested. The episode ends with Kim losing her cool with Saul back home. She's tired of running the risk of having her boyfriend be the opposing counsel, which creates the chance of conflicting interests and possibly having to testify against him in court. So instead of breaking up with him, she proposes to him, as spouses can't testify against each other in court.
I don't care about it! It's nothing to me!
It's wedding time for Saul and Kim. You know what? I was going to refer to him as Saul from the moment he got his name changed, to reflect his transformation in the storyline, but as the name of this episode reminds us, he is and always will be Jimmy. So let's go back to Jimmy. Jimmy gets Hill to be his witness, and I really like how Hill cautions him not to take weddings so lightly.
Well, you at least gonna take her somewhere after this? A little honeymoon? I got a friend that runs a B&B in Roswell. Get you a good deal.
This is a legal arrangement. This way, if I get into trouble, they can't make her testify against me.
You getting hits for that?
Jimmy gets called back in to help the cartel, as Lalo is on trial for murder, with the twist being that he's using a fake alias of the name Jorge de Guzman, and he demands that Jimmy gets him out on bail, an almost impossible ask considering the charges he faces. Jimmy goes back home to Kim and mentions his involvement with the cartel, which really kills the mood of their porking session.
You know what that means? It means money. Ranch in Montana kind of money.
Nacho gets instructions from Lalo to burn down Los Pollos Hermanos, and of course this information relays back to Gus, and he realises that it's better to have Lalo out of prison, where he can more easily monitor his activities, and it would also keep him from being prison shanked, because as Gus says, if anything happens to Lalo this side of the border, the cartel will suspect Gus is behind it. So to get him out of jail, Mike tells Jimmy that a private investigator changed the witness's story, which means this whole case isn't credible, and Jimmy takes that information to court successfully.
She's the only witness tying Mr. de Guzman to the murder scene, and she's been manipulated.
I accept the defense's argument that bond is warranted, but considering the severity of the charges, I will set the amount at $7 million.
$7 million? Yes, and I am so sorry. I can do that.
To keep Nacho in Lalo's good books, Gus helps him fulfill his task of burning down Los Pollos Hermanos. Mike has made up with Kaylee and he reads her a bedtime story.
Okay, kid. We'll finish the rest later. Now, good night.
Not yet, Pop. Just 2 more pages.
Count it. At the end of the episode, Howard approaches Jimmy one last time about the job opportunity, and he says the deal is now off because he knows Jimmy was behind the hookers and bowling balls, and he's very confused as to why Jimmy is being so horrible.
Jimmy, I'm sorry you're in pain.
You're sorry? You kill my brother, and you say you're sorry?
Whoa, hold on there, buddy. You were by far a bigger cause of Chuck's death, and I think deep down he knows this, as he now tries to overcompensate by acting like a big man in front of Howard.
You look down on me, you pity me? Walk away, that's right, Howard. You know why I didn't take the job? Because it's too small! I'm so far beyond you! I'm like a god in human clothing! Lightning bolts shoot from my fingertips!
You're wasting energy.
I'm almost there.
Lalo's bail is posted at $7 million, and he insists that Jimmy be the one to go and collect his money, as he is less likely to be stopped at the border and searched. He reluctantly accepts the job, but demands $100K payments, which for someone who can so easily pay $7 million bond, this is basically pocket change to him. Jimmy picks up the cash from the Silent Twins, and on his way back gets stopped by a rival gang of the cartel.
Whoa, what? No, that's not what he meant. Oh, this is a mistake. It's big. Avocado!
Right at the moment when they're about to execute him, Mike rolls in and saves the day with a massive shootout.
You're in shock. You stay here and breathe.
Unfortunately, every car has been shot full of holes, and the only remaining car that runs is Jimmy's, which after a short journey longer also dies. So these two amigos somehow have to walk all the way back to civilization, which is a brutal enough task on its own, but Jimmy has to carry these 2 heavy bags of cash.
How about we take turns with these bad boys, you know? So we both stay fresh? Fine.
He's run out of water and has to resort to drinking his own pee. And they're also being hunted down by the one surviving gang member who managed to escape the shootout earlier. Right at the point where Jimmy is wanting to just lay down and die, Mike reminds him that people are waiting for him back home. And this inspires Jimmy to offer himself as bait so that Mike can set up his rifle and take out this gang member. And so their journey continues. Kim starts panicking because she hasn't heard from Jimmy in over a day, so she goes to Lalo for information, which is a really bad move because now she's a known person to the cartel.
You didn't come home last night, and you got scared enough to come down here and talk to me.
Jimmy finally gets signal, so he calls Kim, and the reaction we get here is very sweet and loving.
I'm okay.
Jimmy and Mike get picked up by Gus's men, and they look like a couple of rotten baked potatoes that definitely would have died if they spent any longer out in that heat. Back home, Kim takes care of Jimmy by running him a nice bath, and when she goes to take a look at the money he's been paid, she notices the thermal mug has a bullet hole in it. But she doesn't push Jimmy to tell the story until he feels ready to.
You see it? Yeah, Jimmy. I see it.
Jimmy takes the $7 million in cash to be counted at the bonds office, and I like how everyone reacts to seeing this obscene pile of money. The opposing lawyer questions how a civilian would have this much money to his disposal.
$7 million. Your client has $7 million.
Lalo has questions of his own, because of course he does. He wants to know why Jimmy had to walk back, and I'm sure Jimmy's explanation of the car breaking down will satisfy Lalo enough to stop looking into it. He's about to be picked up and go back to Mexico, but when thinking about Jimmy's story, he decides to look into it, and he finds his car riddled with bullet holes. So he goes back to question Jimmy in this tense scene where he keeps asking him the question until he gets the answer he wants to hear.
Tell me again.
Eventually, Kim, who's aware that Jimmy's lying, tries to stop the inquisition by telling Lalo to be grateful that his lawyer went to extreme measures to ensure he got his money. With this, he goes home to Mexico, but tells Nacho that he's got a new plan in mind. Also, in this episode, Kim quit Schweikart and Coakley, feeling that her work there doesn't serve the public like her pro bono cases do. So looks like we're moving away from the Mesa Verde stuff. Thank God. Jimmy confesses all to Kim now that she's involved, and even though I'm using the word confess, it should be said that this event was pretty traumatic for him. He did after all just see a bunch of people murdered in front of his eyes, so that's something you're going to have to try and mentally process before telling other people. Gus learns that Nacho and Lalo have gone to Lalo's gated community, and Mike can tell that Gus will give the order to wipe them all out, which places Nacho in grave danger. Mike tries his best to convince Gus to use Nacho's inside intel and pull him out of there before taking action. Before anything horrible happens, we get to spend time with Lalo and the people he essentially sees as family. Not enough time to be emotionally invested in them, but enough time to understand Lalo's connection with them.
They're supposed to be guarding this place, but I just keep them around because they're so pretty, right?
Nacho is introduced to Don Eladio as Lalo's up-and-coming guy, and it's cool to see Nacho playing it cool, convincing Don Eladio that he belongs in the business.
No quiero que nadie ni por un momento piense en jugármela y...
Salud.
Back in the gated community, Nacho gets a mysterious call telling him to unlock the back gate at 3 AM. And as terrible clickbait videos have taught us, nothing good happens at 3 AM. But we'll come back in a moment to see what does happen. Jimmy and Kim take an impromptu vacation, staying at a lavish hotel, and at first Kim refuses to stay more than one night, not wanting to be in hiding forever and trying to carry on in spite of Lalo's intimidation. Luckily for them both, Jimmy gets word that Lalo is out of the picture, so for now they can relax. That night, Kim tells Jimmy that Howard approached her and told her about the bowling balls and hooker stuff in an attempt to make her see that Jimmy has become toxic. Jimmy expects Kim to have a problem with what he's done, but instead she says that he's not done enough, and they spend the whole night talking about ideas about what they could do to him next.
Pour a barrel of chlorine into his swimming pool, so then...
Bleaches his hair and his eyebrows and everything.
Yes, and the eyebrows.
It's done in a semi-serious way, but we soon find out they aim to take these ideas fully seriously, and you know I'm going to vent my anger on this as it plays out. Back to Nacho, the time has come and he unlocks the gate, where a troop of armed hitmen enter the compound and they start taking people out without even a second glance to see who they're shooting at, with their only mission being to make sure Lalo doesn't make it out alive. Oops, Lalo makes it out alive, using a secret tunnel under a bathroom, but then he goes back in to take them out from behind. There's a great moment where he sees them crawling through his tunnel, so he blindly dangles the gun and holds the trigger down, knowing he can't possibly miss.
Keep the change, you filthy animal.
He interrogates the last guy and learns that Nacho was the inside man and is responsible for the slaughter of his community. The choice to have the sound of his footsteps mixed with thunder was a mwah, chef's kiss moment. This is a pretty iconic opening. It's a flash forward to a time where Saul Goodman's house and belongings are being taken by the government, and it's interesting to get a clue as to how well he lived when he was in his prime, and that his gaudy, egocentric taste continued to ramp up with his level of fame. Nacho is on the run from Lalo, and he can't be seen by anyone in this town, as they all act as informants to the Salamanca family, including this humble couple currently helping Lalo to recover. And it's within these next couple of scenes that Lalo kills them both, and uses the husband's body as a dummy for his own, so that the silent twins spread the news of his death. And my only wish is that this scene of the twins looking at his body was shot from a different angle, so that we could get a good look at how similar the dummy body was to Lalo's, because then it would have been easier for the audience to connect the dots. Before multiple watches of these scenes, I missed whose body this was supposed to be, as the shot is kind of brief, and his facial hair is soaked in blood, making it hard to distinguish. Gus already suspects that Lalo is still alive, considering the guy who reported the mission as complete is now dead, and he hints to Mike that he has set a plan to take Nacho out and tie up the loose end. Again, Mike goes to bat for Nacho, saying he's been loyal to his task and deserves respect for it.
Loyalty goes both ways. Largo's done everything you asked him.
He wasn't given a choice.
Maybe so, but he played a tough game, and he played it on the square.
Jimmy and Kim are at a dinner, and she starts talking to him about his next moves as Saul Goodman, pushing him into the idea of upgrading his car to match his image, and also talking him into acting on the ideas they shared when it comes to sticking it to Howard. It's clear from this point on that Kim has fully gone off the rails, not even pretending anymore to be a good person deep down, and goading Jimmy into joining in on the fun. This scene where she's chewing gum and spying on Howard so that Jimmy can carry out his plan is the one scene in this show where she's kind of ugly, purely just because she's being a snake towards Howard. And I know that seems like quite a harsh response, but like I said before, just keep waiting and then tell me I'm wrong when we get to the final scene with Howard. Jimmy plants some fake drugs in Howard's locker, and it falls out in front of Cliff Main, which will naturally break some of the trust he held in him.
Where did it come from?
Didn't it just fall out of your locker?
Seems Gus had a change of heart and arranged for a hotel room to be set aside for Nacho, with a care package waiting inside so that he can protect himself while he waits for pickup. Could have included a pork pie and a pot noodle or something. Brother's gotta eat to stay alive, you know. We get a scene where Kaylee and Mike are building a marble tower, or whatever. And this tower building sure is thirsty work.
May I please have some more lemonade?
No, you drink about a gallon already.
Please, Pop.
You know what? I'm counting this. She isn't asking for more time, but damn, this kid always wants more. 5 more minutes, Pop. More lemonade, Pop. Please, may I have more battery acid in my cereal, Pop. Mike and Gus's crew enter Nacho's house and send the meth girls on their way home.
But we like it here.
Well, now you're going to like it someplace else. Go to your families. Don't have a family? Then you go to a friend. You don't have friends?
Then join the Basement Buddies Discord, link in description. Then he empties the safe and replaces it, leaving inside some of the cash and a letter containing the number for the hotel Nacho's staying at. Why are they doing this? Well, I'm not entirely clear. My best guess is that he wants Nacho to be captured by the Salamancas, but doesn't that run the risk of Nacho ratting him out, knowing he's going to be killed anyway, so he might as well take out Gus with him? It's kind of a messy part of the story in my opinion, but the action and tension as Nacho makes his escape from the hotel is kind of amazing. It is strange why the Silent Twins make no attempt to run after him. I guess it would kill their creepy psycho vibe, maybe? But come on, just run to the truck, please. You could have easily captured him here. Jimmy and Kim come up with a way to solidify the rumours that Howard is a cokehead, and this plan involves the Kettlemans. Jimmy tells cuckold Craig and ballbuster Betsy that Howard was most likely under the influence when he represented them in court, meaning his judgment was impaired. They take this information to Cliff Main, who as we saw earlier already had his suspicions.
Howard Hamlin.
Oh, you don't see it right away. He is very high functioning.
He is living a life outside his life.
Yes, he is.
As they sometimes say.
Yeah.
Now that the Kettleman's role in this plan is done, Kim threatens to tell her inside contacts at the tax offices about their shady new business, unless they stop trying to seek out legal representation. And as Jimmy and Kim drive away, we see they're being followed by someone. An awesome moment in this episode I have to mention is when Gus goes to pay his fake condolences to Hector, and the look Hector gives him here accidentally gives away that Lalo is still alive. Such a top tier actor. This guy is going to blow up one day, I can feel it. Nacho's getaway car is busted up, so he hides inside an old petroleum tank, which still has some petroleum left in it. It's really grim watching him submerge himself to avoid detection, and then having the agonising weight of staying inside out of sight until nightfall. A good Samaritan at a nearby garage allows Nacho to wash himself off, and not to sound gay or anything, but god damn. I really like that one ABBA song since I heard Chuck singing it with Jimmy.
But I was a fool for playing by the rules.
On a more serious note, Nacho rings his dad and gets emotional knowing that he's okay. His dad, of course, is oblivious to Nacho's precarious situation, so doesn't understand why this call is so hard-hitting for Nacho.
No importa, papá, solo hablé para ver cómo estás. Es todo.
Nacho gets picked up by Mike, and they share a drink together to discuss the plan, where Gus hands Nacho to the Salamancas, a plan necessary to keep the protection of his dad ongoing. Nacho's given the instruction to convince the Salamancas that he wasn't working for Gus but someone else, and we all know where this is heading, but let's catch up with them a bit later. Jimmy and Kim continue their scheming towards Howard, this time using Huell to bump into Howard's parking valet so that he can sneak his keys and make copies. Attached to this new key is a remote which locks and unlocks the car so that Jimmy can carry out the next part of his plan. I really like how Huell calls him out in this moment, asking why a lawyer and his lawyer wife, who definitely earn decent money, would be playing these silly games.
We're doing the Lord's work here.
If you say so.
Huell is a good person. As Nacho is gifted to bolster around the Salamancas, he's given a chance to use his final words to tell them who he was working for. And not only does he stick to his word pretending it was someone else, he uses this moment to lay down some cold truths about what he's done.
Then you know what else, Hector? I put you in that chair. Oh yeah, your heart meds. I switched them for sugar pills. So when you are sitting in your shitty nursing home and you're sucking down on your Jell-O night after night for the rest of your life, you think of me.
I have to pixelate this, but he carries out the act of self-deletion to close off the story of Ignacio Varga. I was deeply shocked by this scene, but man, what a way to go. Michael Mando acted his balls off here, and he was such a valuable part of this show. I love this guy. R.I.P. Nacho. This opening introduced me to the song Best Things in Life by the Dreamliners. I wish I could show you how perfect this song fits with the scene, but as you know by now, I can't show you it. This sequence shows you how Gus basically has a fake family on payroll, and they just go about their lives pretending that armed guards aren't also in the room with them. It's amazing. Howard arrives at his therapy session, and Jimmy comes along cosplaying as him to steal his car. When you order Howard Hamlin from Wish. I don't know whether to laugh or puke. This image is just foul. He then picks up Wendy, the hooker, and waits for Kim's signal to drive past while she's out for lunch with Cliff Main.
Son of a bitch! Ah! You twisted, nasty piece of shit!
Wasn't that Howard?
This was a super funny part of the episode, I can't lie, even though I'm gradually getting more annoyed with the injustice against Howard, especially as we learn from his therapy session that his marriage is falling apart.
At home, things are more or less the same. It's not any worse. I guess I should be grateful for that. It's like we're deadlocked.
At the courthouse, everyone's treating Jimmy like crap because they know he essentially helped Lalo get away with murder. But out of this depressing situation comes a wave of new criminal clients who all know Jimmy's name because of this. And this spike in business convinces him to go look at a new potential office with Kim. But she looks a little distracted right now. And that's because earlier, Mike told her that he has guys following her as Lalo is still alive and might try to contact her. This information she keeps from Jimmy for now, trying to avoid a panic. Cliff confronts Howard about what he saw, and from this conversation, Howard figures out that Jimmy is the one still trying to mess with him. So he tricks Jimmy into meeting him in a rundown boxing ring to see if they can settle their differences. And it's pretty funny watching these two punch each other, looking like a fight between two old people who have never thrown a punch in their entire life. When Howard inevitably knocks him down to the ground, it doesn't really resolve anything, but afterwards he instructs the PI to follow him around to see what Jimmy's next scheme is. Gus is really on edge as he waits for Lalo to appear out of the shadows at any given time, and due to his overly cautious nature, he plans ahead by hiding guns and measuring footsteps in places where things might go down. But Lalo isn't anywhere nearby. In fact, he's very far away in Germany, in this highly intelligent play where he flirts with Werner's widowed wife to figure out where their home is.
I'd like to invite you in, but I have work in the morning.
Of course.
It's actually kind of heartbreaking seeing this emotionally fragile woman falling for Lalo and only for him to have ulterior motives. He could have at least banged her to give her some self-esteem, come on man. The next day he breaks into their home and discovers a plaque that his old crew made for him, so now he knows what company they came from. In a suspenseful twist, Margareta comes home early and Lalo loads his gun ready to end her, but I'm glad to say that he escaped through a window instead. I don't know why I care about her feelings this much. I guess it's just a sign that she was a well-written character. We see a young Kim working for her mum to pull a scam on a shopping mall, showing more of the twisted morals that she was raised under.
I got you something. Get out, relax. You got away with it.
The episode continues to be a bummer, as we see Howard in his big expensive home as he's making coffee for his wife, and it's just so depressing seeing how void of love this relationship is, and the house just feels cold and empty, when a man in Howard's position should be living his best life. This house should be buzzing with family and life.
You think this is bad? This chicanery?
Ready to make his life even worse, Kim and Jimmy are working on two schemes. One is getting their hands on some drugs that dilate pupils, which can be introduced to the system simply by skin contact. And the other scheme is dressing up an actor to look like a judge, so they can stage a fake exchange or something. It will become clearer later. But anyway, near the end of the episode, Jimmy sees the real life judge and spots that he has a broken arm, whereas they didn't give a sling for their hired actor to wear. I gotta be honest, at this point in the episode, I felt myself getting really tired with all the scheming going on. Not just because of the injustice towards Howard, it just feels like every episode lately has just been scheme after scheme. But in this episode, what does mix things up is that we get to see some very unexpected and horrifying gore. Lalo tracks down one of the Germans and chops off his foot with an axe. He almost gets taken out by the German, which was cool to see that Lalo is not invincible, and that if you're going to go up against a giant German guy who likes to chop wood, you're going to have a challenge on your hands. While out stargazing, Mike watches over Kaylee with some binoculars, because he's technically supposed to be working right now, I believe. I only mention this scene for two reasons. One is that it shows how Mike feels he's missing out on quality family time, and also, of course, we have this.
What's next? But Mom...
Hey.
That counts. Shut up. It counts. Oh boy, this is the episode that rocked me to my core. But before we talk about that part, Lalo is scoping out the laundry place, and he goes to call in the information to Hector when he hears the phone line is being tapped. Rightly so, he suspects it's Gus, so he tricks him into thinking he's going to attack tonight, which will distract Gus's crew from his actual plan. Kim and Jimmy are working on their plan too. It's quite long-winded, so I'm going to try and give you a brief version. To get the drugs onto Howard's skin, they cover the photos of the fake exchange with the drug powder, and the PI that Howard hired is actually someone Jimmy hired, knowing Howard was going to get a PI. So this PI hands the photos to Howard, who sees the quote-unquote judge doing shady deals with Jimmy. Then in this very important meeting Howard has with the Sandpiper lawyers and the resident representative Irene, the mediator of this meeting is the real-life judge, and Howard is quick to jump on him.
Our mediator here keeps using the word compromise, when he, in fact, is compromised.
I beg your pardon?
When Howard reveals the pictures to prove his involvement, the pictures have been swapped. So now Howard is a sweaty, panicky mess with dinner plate-sized pupils. And along with his reputation, this meeting is ruined. That evening, Howard goes round to Jimmy and Kim's to wave the white flag of surrender. But he does so in a legendary way that puts them in their place.
I've worked my way through worse. Debt, depression, my marriage falling apart. You two are soulless. Jimmy, you can't help yourself. Chuck knew it. You were born that way. But you, one of the smartest and most promising human beings I've ever known. And this is the life you choose.
During this dressing down, the room turns cold as Lalo walks in. Howard, unaware of who this man is, doesn't know that he needs to run for his life right now until he sees the gun.
I think I'm in the middle of something. There's really no need to...
Oh my God! This moment right here actually broke me. I'm being serious. I was more upset at Howard's death than Nacho's, because as I've said multiple times leading up to this moment, Howard deserved better. And this was a real turning point for me, with my slowly declining love towards Jimmy and Kim. And this was the final nail in the coffin. Now don't get me wrong, I'm still invested in their story, but my final question to you, which is echoed by Howard himself, how do they feel that what they've been doing is justified? Of course they couldn't have known he was about to have his brains blown out, but regardless, they ruined his life. Lalo orders Kim to go and shoot Gus, giving her an hour to finish the job and get back, or he'll shoot Jimmy. But this actually isn't his plan. His plan is to ambush Gus at the laundromat, while Mike and the boys rush to Kim's place. For me, the confusing part is why Gus would go to the laundromat, and how would Lalo know that Gus was going to go there? Well, anyway, Lalo takes out the guards and starts filming Gus's last confession, as he shows Don Eladio exactly what he's been hiding.
Don Eladio, he escuchado algunas historias sobre este lugar. Unos ingenieros alemanes se tardaron 10 meses en construir todo esto.
Right at the moment where Gus is given a chance to have his last words, he trips the power out and shoots Lalo dead. The actual moment of his death is way too graphic to show, so let's just move on. Mike is setting the story straight with Kim and Jimmy, so that when the police come asking about Howard's disappearance, they are prepared with what to say. The story goes that Howard came round intoxicated, not making any sense, and then he just left. The police will later find his car next to the sea, which was shown to us in the opening of this episode. It's all very sad stuff, and I don't imagine the episodes are going to get any cheerier from this point on. When Mike buries the bodies, he does so with an element of respect for Howard, knowing he was an innocent bystander. This look on Mike's face says it all, and it's crazy to think that beneath the future meth lab where Walter went on a rampage trying to kill a fly, and Jesse danced around in an inflated suit, lies the bodies of Howard Hamlin and Lalo Salamanca. Another great opening, showing us how Kim and Jimmy are trying their best to carry on as normal, while Mike and the crew clean up the grisly scene. But when they get back to their apartments, it's clear that things will never be the same. Gus is called in for a meeting between the Dons, where Hector accuses him of being a traitor. But bear in mind, without Lalo's evidence, all they have is Hector's word against Gus's, and ultimately they decide it's better to keep the peace.
Por favor.
There's a cool moment where Don Eladio addresses the fact that Gus probably hates him for killing his partner, but Gus needs to remember who's boss here. Better Call Saul has thrown in a few hints here and there that Gus's business partner Max was also his boyfriend. And while it's almost become cliche that modern media retcons characters to have been gay the whole time or whatever for marketing purposes, in this particular case it actually fits his character quite naturally. He's never shown any interest in women, he's softly spoken when in a casual setting, and then this episode further develops this idea when he's seen flirting with this wine connoisseur, but decides to cut it off before he gets too attached. My interpretation of this scene is that he can't let anyone get too close because they could become the next Max. I really like that they included this scene of a more human side of Gus, and it gives more rationale as to why he hates Don Eladio so much. Mike decides he needs to tell Nacho's dad about the loss of his son, and the way his dad reacts is just depressing, man. He doesn't burst into tears, he simply just recognises that getting revenge for Nacho's death would ultimately just lead to more deaths, and he doesn't want that. Continuing the theme of grief, Howard's wife confronts Jimmy about the prank wars and expresses how it doesn't make sense that Howard would have taken his own life due to a drug addiction. Ultimately, Kim helps him snake out of this conversation by making up more lies about the time she saw Howard sniffing powder.
Please excuse me.
Yeah, this conversation's just aggravating. Let's move on. Later that evening, Jimmy gets word that Kim handed her notice into the bar association, which means that suddenly she's no longer going to be a lawyer. A risky move considering that Mike instructed them to act normal, and she couldn't even make it past one day. Kim isn't just leaving the law here, she's also decided she's leaving Jimmy, because as she accurately puts it, Kim and Jimmy are bad for each other.
I have had the time of my life with you. But we are bad for everyone around us. Other people suffer because of us.
The episode ends on a slightly lighter tone, with a flash forward to when Saul is in his mansion, at the top of his game, surrounded by materialistic wealth and waking up with a hooker. The majority of these final episodes are presented in black and white to reflect where we are in the timeline and to be a contrast to the colourful character he used to be. It's a fine choice, but I've always preferred my TV and films in colour because the toddler part of my brain needs constant stimulus with flashy colours and noises. The start of the episode picks up after Jimmy told the vacuum guy he was going to handle the situation instead of running away again. His first move is to become friends with this old lady who gets stuck in the snow, cutting the wire on her scooter to ensure that she needs help to get home. And this isn't just any old lady, it's the cab driver's mum.
Call me Jean.
Jimmy convinces him to be a part of his next scam so that he can get some excitement in his life. His next scam is to rob one of the clothing stores within the shopping mall where he works. To prepare for this, he buddies up with the security team by bringing them Cinnabons, and then he times how long it takes the monitor guy to eat his bun before he returns to work. And he also brings in the cabbie's friend to help out. It might be worth mentioning in case you happen to notice, but the actor who plays the cabbie in this episode is a different actor to the last time we saw him. On the big night, there's a funny part where the cabbie slips on the polished floor, and Jimmy has to stall the security guy with some of his classic terrible fake crying.
What am I doing? What? Oh, God.
As the title suggests, we get to see Walter and Jesse back on the screen, and I'm going to be controversial here and say that this part felt kind of forced and unnecessary. It didn't really add to Jimmy's story, and it kind of just felt like we were given member berries.
Oh, I remember.
Plus, Aaron Paul looks way older in this reenactment of the scene.
Oh, yeah. Sure. I'll just stand, I guess. Dick.
Walter, on the other hand, isn't distractingly different looking, and yeah, it was cool to see them again, but to me this just felt more distracting than it felt natural to the timeline. The main part of this episode is watching Jimmy and the guy pull another scam. This time Jimmy is getting people drunk at a bar, then slipping them drugs so they pass out at home, where the cabbie's friend then sneaks in to steal their identities. Jimmy's morals get criticised when the last mark turns out to be a cancer patient, and this guy refuses to steal from him and says they should stop while they're ahead. And I like how Jimmy's experience with Walter White comes into play here.
So, a guy with cancer can't be an asshole? Huh, believe me, I speak from experience.
He convinces the cabbie to remain in the game, and we'll see what happens with this in the next episode. In this flash forward, Kim is living a new life as a boring office worker for a sprinkler company, and her boyfriend is this twat in a tiger shirt. Hausenberg says only twats wear tiger shirts. She then gets a call from Jimmy where it's revealed that it's been 6 years since they last spoke, meaning Kim has had to sit with the news of what he was involved with for all of those years, and she seems kinda shook to hear his voice again.
You shouldn't be calling me.
Oh, hey, you're awake.
You shouldn't be calling.
The conversation doesn't go as nicely as Jimmy hoped, and she says that he should turn himself in, which enrages Jimmy, calling her a hypocrite that should also be turning herself in if she can't handle this guilty conscience. So she does exactly that. She prints off a signed confession and gives it to Howard's wife, telling her absolutely everything that went down.
It all happened in an instant, and he didn't suffer.
He didn't suffer. The lies you two made up, the picture you painted, that's all he is now. That's all anybody remembers.
Jimmy is at the cancer man's house snooping around, and he sees that the man has woken up from the drugs. But when he goes to knock him out, he sees the man has passed out again, allowing him to escape. The cabbie waiting outside gets spooked because a cop car pulled up behind him coincidentally, and it's hilarious to see from the cop's point of view as the cabbie panics and flees the scene. There's a flashback scene where we see Kim handing Jimmy divorce papers, and he acts like it's no big deal. She was the one who dumped him after all. Outside the office, Kim shares a smoke with Jesse, a scene that adds no real value and is basically just more member berries.
It's crazy. It's like bananas all this rain. I mean, I thought we were like in a desert, you know?
I just can't get over how vastly different Jesse's voice is here. It's so distracting.
I mean, what the hell did he even want that thing for? Huh? I mean, I still don't know. Dumbass.
I love you, Vince and Peter, but come on, guys. Was this really needed? Back to current times, Jimmy goes to the cabbie's mum's house to get her to go bail him out as he can't do it, and he can hear that her laptop is playing a very familiar sound.
And that's why I fight for you, Albuquerque. Better Call Saul.
What's that?
You tell me.
Marion, this is Valerie, the life alert. Are you okay?
There's a criminal standing in my kitchen threatening me. He's a wanted man, and his name is Saul Goodman.
Jimmy's on the run from the police, and he gets found while hiding in a trash can preparing to make a call. While in the holding cell, he has a mini breakdown, unwilling to accept that the way he gets caught out is after an old lady ratted on him and he's caught covered in garbage gunk. It kinda lacks the flair and magic of a story that this man feels he deserves. It's here that he gets the idea to call in Bill Oakley as co-counsel, for seemingly no good reason other than trying to do him a favour by boosting his status of working on such a high profile case. Perhaps you have another theory on this, let me know in the comments. While Jimmy and Bill sit there and listen to the lawyers lay out the very harsh but fair deal to him, Jimmy explains that all he has to do is convince one jury member that he was forced to work with Walter White. If he can convince just one person, it might put a blemish on this lawyer's perfect record. So with that, they agree to begin a lengthy negotiation with him, much to the upset of Marie Schrader, who is here to witness Jimmy's case.
You're not going to negotiate with this man. You're not.
As part of the deal, Jimmy gets to go to a nicer prison and is down to only serving 7 years, but he wants that little bit more. He wants Bluebell mint chocolate ice cream once a week, and in exchange offers information on Howard Hamlin. But they angrily shoot him down a peg or two by telling him they already know this information because Kim told them.
You got nothing left to sell. Last chance. Do we go to trial or do we have a deal?
Yes. Yes, we have a deal.
But of course, Jimmy isn't done with his magic. But the last magic trick he pulls in court is to confess to even more wrongdoings, to the surprise of everyone watching, both within the story and watching IRL.
Your Honor, I believe the court deserves the whole truth.
You are contradicting your plea agreement's sworn factual basis.
He does this because he literally has no one else left in this world. If he was to get out of jail in 7 years having played into his deal, he would be a free man, but without the respect of the one person he still cares about, Kim. She sits in court and hears him finally confess that he regrets what happened to Chuck.
When I saw a chance to hurt him, I took it. I got his malpractice insurance canceled. I took away the one thing he lived for, the law. After that, he killed himself.
We see this magic working because she visits him in prison and they share a cigarette together just like the good old times. Their conversation suggests that even though he's now serving an 80-year sentence, she will at least be in contact with him. And well, at this point, that's the best thing he could have ever hoped for.
86 years. But with good behavior, who knows?
From the way the prisoners interact with him, it's clear that he's well respected behind bars. Even on the bus journey on his first day, he gets recognised, with the whole bus chanting his catchphrase. The final thing we see is his face disappearing behind a wall as Kim goes home. And that's the end of Better Call Saul. At the end of Breaking Bad, my heart was heavy watching someone I identified with dying on his own sword. At the end of this show, however, I feel more anxiety at the idea of closing the book on this universe. My Breaking Bad video took me to a new world of possibilities, and the comments I received made me believe I can continue this journey with you watching, and I just hope that now I've delivered on my promise of giving you the Better Call Saul video, you'll continue to stick around. I hope you do, because who knows, the next cultural phenomenon might be just around the corner, and I'm going to be right here ready to experience it with you.
It's showtime, folks.